Number 10. Sway. I am straight up just enamored with Sway. Her abilities are truly remarkable and the backstory of her origin is both captivating and honestly heart-wrenching. Sway's extraordinary powers first emerged during her teenage years. While preparing for college in New York City, Suzanne and her parents found themselves unwittingly caught in the crossfire of a gang war. Tragically, Suzanne's parents lost their lives in this attack, but miraculously, she somehow survived. Well, thanks to her newfound ability to manipulate time. In a moment of instinct when her powers first manifested, Suzanne halted the trajectory of the bullets that were aimed at her, saving herself. However, lacking the experience and comprehension and finesse needed, she couldn't extend the same protection to her parents, who of course, as I said, perished. Sway's unique powers grant her control over the flow of time in her immediate vicinity. She possesses the ability to rewind the temporal memory of a location, allowing her to revisit and analyze past events. Utilizing her temporal manipulation abilities, Sway embarked on a mission to track down her parents' assailants, ultimately aiding the police in apprehending the criminals responsible for the tragedy. It was during this revelation of her extraordinary powers to law enforcement that she actually came to the attention of Moira McTaggart and subsequently joined up with the X-Men. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd and if you love it when we talk mutants, be sure to let us know by clicking that like button. Number 9. Longshot. Longshot, though perceived by some as a mutant, rejects this classification himself. Believed to be a clone and potentially both the father and son somehow of Shatterstar, his existence is entangled in the peculiarities. His existence is entangled in the peculiarities of a Mojoverse-based time loop, a fate shared with Shatterstar and, to some extent, Spiral, and honestly kind of a little bit of Dazzler too, potentially. Despite Longshot being a genetically engineered mutant and clone of Shatterstar, he adamantly denies identifying as a mutant. The X-Men quickly embraced Longshot upon discovering him, and he promptly joined forces with the team in confronting Mojo. Initially grappling with amnesia, Longshot spent a significant portion of his early adventures with the X-Men attempting to reclaim his own lost memories. Number 8. Dupe. Despite Dupe's eccentric nature, his status as a mutant remains unconfirmed. His origin is honestly shrouded in mystery even at this point, leaving room for speculation that he could be a mutant, he could be an alien, or he could even be a being just from another dimension. The lack of explicit verification makes him a peculiar addition to this list, although he clearly isn't the only non-mutant to join the X-Men team, as we just established, though he might just be one of the quirkiest additions, mutant or not. Dupe has engaged in numerous adventures with the X-Men, serving as the receptionist at the Jean Grey School for Higher Learning working for Wolverine. His presence on Krakoa suggests that despite his as of yet still unknown origin, he really is at home among mutants, emphasizing his enigmatic connection to the mutant world, which continues to be really strong. Number 7. Egg. Fabio Medina might not seem like a powerful mutant based on his ability, but since his rise to the supremely important mutant group known as the Five on Krakoa, he can be considered one of the most important and powerful mutants around. When he combines his powers with that of the Five, he has control over life and death. Originally, the bouncy gold balls that he shot forth from his chest were believed to be nothing special, but it was later revealed that these balls were actually infertile eggs, which could be used in the process of resurrecting new mutants. Number 6. Tempest. Eva Bell is another member of the Five. She has actually appeared in less issues than Egg, if you can believe it, despite the fact that she has a pretty neat power set, and it's been neat since the beginning, which allows her to time travel. Tempest, as she used to be known, was able to control the passage of time in a specific pocket of space. She could also slow time in a current space that she also inhabited, either slowing time around her or creating time bubbles to manipulate time in that bubble, where she could speed it up or slow it down. The only challenge for her has been losing control of her powers, which can cause them to behave unpredictably. Still, controlling time is a pretty impressive and powerful ability to have. Number 5. Empath. Manuel de la Rocha made his first appearance in the original New Mutant series, where he was part of Emma Frost's team known as the Hellions. He's recently reappeared in the newest Hellion series from 2020 and proves just how powerful, but also how sadistic he can be. Empath's power is, you guessed it, empathy, and he can use this power to not only send sense others' emotions, but also to control them, in effect manipulating others into doing whatever he wishes them to do. His influence can be subtle, such that someone might not even realize they're being manipulated by him, or it can be more forceful, turning his victims into complete husks of their former selves and bending them fully to his will. Number 4. Vulcan. Vulcan is one of the most powerful mutants around, being an Omega level mutant, skilled in energy manipulation and absorption. Yet he is somehow the lesser known of all the Summers despite his insane power levels. He has also demonstrated the ability to absorb his opponent's powers as well and use them for himself on the rare occasion. Vulcan is the youngest Summers brother, also known as Gabe Summers, and we only learned of his existence in 2006 when he first appeared in the comic X-Men Deadly Genesis issue number 1. And yet he is considered the most powerful of these three. Number 3. Orphan Maker and Nanny. Orphan Maker still remains a relatively mysterious character, though is also one who still proves to be a force to be reckoned with in combat. Orphan Maker is also known as Peter and was part of a plot of Mr. Sinister's originally. However, when Mr. Sinister decided that Peter could not be controlled, he decided to eliminate him. Nanny, an insane cyborg, however, saved him, believing it was her responsibility to look after orphan mutant children and protect them. Although I will say she's got a weird way of going about it. While insane, Nanny was also once a scientist and remains quite intelligent. She actually outfitted Orphan Maker with weapons and a powerful suit to help her in her task. While it's still unclear as to what Orphan Maker's true mutant powers are, and while he seems to still have the mind of a child, probably due to Nanny's manipulation, his suit and weapons make him a formidable foe in combat, and he often uses pixie dust in battle to help Nanny influence and control the minds of their opponents, as she herself is a telepath, but a weak one, so she needs a little bit of help. Needs a little bit of pixie dust. Even during a fight with Cyclops, Scott's optic blasts were unable to harm Orphan Maker while he was in his armor, with Scott's blast simply reflecting off the armor, causing more harm than help really. Number 2. Trinary. Considering the modern age we live in, Trinary is a pretty powerful mutant. Her abilities allow her to control all tech that is within her line of sight. She has used these powers to move massive sums of money digitally and to manipulate and control Sentinel tech. Currently on Krakoa, Trinary is one of the few technopathic mutants trusted with the important project known as Sleeping Giant, wherein mutants monitor for upcoming advancement in Sentinel technology, such as Nimrods or the creation of a mother mold, so that they can ideally put a stop to its development. Project Sleeping Giant were instrumental in helping the X-Men to destroy a mother mold that Orchis was creating before it went online. Number 1. Bailey Hoskins. Now you might think I'm joking here if you happen to know the obscure Bailey Hoskins, but I'm really not. Bailey appeared in his own miniseries titled X-Men, Worst X-Man Ever. He was known for being the worst X-Man ever because his ability only allowed him to do one thing: explode. But he didn't have any regeneration powers, so he basically was a mutant who could never use his powers, otherwise he'd kill himself. It's kind of a one-hit wonder. So how is that powerful? Well, it's also implied in the series that when he does choose to sacrifice himself and blow up the villain of the story, that he makes it possible for Earth 616 to come into existence. So without him, we wouldn't have the main Marvel continuity that we know and love today, potentially. If saving the entire continuity from becoming a dystopian future isn't powerful, then I don't know what is. Number 10. Madeline Pryor. I have a strong admiration for Madeline Pryor, one of the most captivating villains in the X-Men series. Maddie's backstory reveals what drives her actions, and despite her evil deeds, one cannot help but empathize with her. She's known as the Goblin Queen, and her dominant energy adds to her straight up allure. Maddie is a woman who always gets what she wants no matter the cost, which has led her to commit some seriously heinous acts. However, deep down, Maddie craves love and acceptance, and all her attempts to achieve this have only pushed her further away from it, sadly. She perfectly fits the quote, "Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned." Maddie is deadly, dangerous, often unhinged, and filled with rage, but her backstory also makes her a very tragic character. It's hard, honestly, not to love her. She definitely deserves your love and admiration. Also, if you're wondering why I included her on this list, it's from experience. Whenever I cosplay as Madeline Pryor, I frequently get mistaken for DC Comics' Raven, so she's clearly not super well known. But, you know, I love her anyways. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love when we talk X-Men, here on Top 10 Nerd. I know I do. Be sure to head on over to our X-Men playlist for even more good X-Men content. Number 9. Mojo. Mojo is probably one of the freakiest villains we have for the X-Men. While fans of the comics may be familiar with him, more casual fans may not. He is from his own universe known as the Mojoverse. Here he runs his own television network and is obsessed with securing good ratings, making those who serve him perform on live broadcasts, and the performances he often demands from folks usually involve death-defying acts and other dangerous and deadly feats. So, pretty scary. Number 8. Unus the Untouchable. A villain who almost foiled the X-Men in their early days was Unus. Unus the Untouchable was a mutant who couldn't be touched by those who would do harm to him, making him seemingly invincible when he first came up against the X-Men in issue number 8 of the original series. His power was also weirdly specific, as it didn't repel all things from him and mainly seemed to target those who fought against him and projectiles that of course would do him harm. When Unus turned to a life of crime, Beast was the one to stop him by creating a device that intensified his power, causing everything to be repelled from Unus, including food. Starving, Unus eventually agreed to stay on the straight and narrow, and Beast returned his power levels to how they once were, allowing Unus to return to his wrestling career.
Number 7. Nature Girl. Although Lin Lee started off at Jean Grey's School for Higher Learning, after she witnessed some of the horrible things humanity is doing to the earth and to nature, she would instead become an ego-terrorist, fighting back against humanity, which makes sense given her powers. Nature Girl's powers are directly connected to the natural world. She can communicate, influence, manipulate, and control nature, living beings except I guess for not humans or mutants, plants, natural phenomena like the weather and geology of the earth, and the matter and energy of which all things are composed. Now that statement alone kind of encompasses a lot of different stuff. She can call upon animals and ally herself with them. She can make plants grow, move and attack people. She can control weather to a degree and heal nature to a degree too. She was on the run from Wolverine for a while and was able to get away from him a few times using her abilities, and more recently she mutated even more and became even more uncontrollable. But she looks totally awesome wielding the Krakoan cudgel with her big antlers and these like goat legs. It's kinda cool. Number 6. Toad. Toad's biggest claim to fame would be as a member of the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, but Mortimer Toynbee has also been a part of the X-Men for some time and was a student at Jean Grey's school. It makes sense that the X-Men would take him on given his massive list of abilities. Toad has a degree of superhuman strength, specifically in his back legs, which allows the little weirdo to jump around 25 to 37 feet, and he'll kick you so hard that you ain't getting back up again. He's got flexible bone structure, superhuman stamina, durability, reflexes, and agility. Toad, like a lot of super beings, has a regenerative healing factor, but unlike a lot of mutants, he has UV vision, a super strong 30-foot prehensile tongue, acidic saliva, sticky paralytic resin out of his pores, and pheromone secretion. I can understand why he isn't exactly at the top of the mutant landscape, partially because he's kind of lame and gross, but he's not someone you should sleep on. Number 5. Cypher. Cypher has what some people believe to be a pretty horrible mutant ability, especially when it comes to combat. Personally, I would kill to be able to subconsciously translate any written or spoken language, human or alien. He can also subconsciously understand body language and intention, as well as decipher codes and computer languages. After he was resurrected, and also so Marvel could make him actually useful, everything he sees is interpreted into language, basically meaning that he's able to read life itself. Now he isn't exactly a fan favorite, and his powers aren't really anything to write home about, but he was a member of the X-Men, and he was actually very instrumental in the Krakoan era with his ability to talk to the living island. Number 4. Unus the Untouchable. Now I gotta say, the force field abilities of wrestler, criminal, and villain Unus the Untouchable definitely have some major drawbacks. The positives are great. His force field can withstand blows from the Incredible Hulk, he can project his force field to move objects, he could also use the shield to be untouchable, hence the name, opening it up to be able to grab things and eat. Now the drawback would come in the fact that there have been multiple times where Unus had his abilities increased, but to a point that he couldn't even control his own abilities. At this time, his shield would literally close him off from everything. He couldn't grab things, he couldn't eat food, he couldn't even breathe oxygen, which caused him to even pass out on one occasion, which luckily deactivated his powers, allowing him to survive. Now maybe if he used his powers for good more often, like he did during his short stint with the X-Men, the writers would make him less self-destructive, but for now, that's just the way it is.
Number 3. Slipstream. On my previous list I talked about the mutant known as Lifeguard, but now it's time to focus on her brother, who is also a mutant, don't you know, Davis Cameron, aka Slipstream. While his sister Heather worked as an actual lifeguard in Australia, Davis himself was a surfer. His powers weren't activated until later in his life and were actually awoken by Sage after his sister went missing, and it was revealed his latent mutant abilities could be used to help find and then rescue her. Slipstream's abilities allow him to create quantum portals, which can transport him and any passengers he takes along with him across great distances. However, it should be noted it requires a lot of concentration for him to bring others along with him. He can also track previous teleportations, allowing him to use these warp wave abilities to find his way to the destination and location of teleporters that he's tracking. Which I think is a pretty useful ability, tracking teleporters, because they're tricky. Number 2. Spider-Girl. Well, not naturally born, but kinda made in a lab, Spider-Girl made a single appearance in Avenging Spider-Man issue 16. She had similar powers to Spider-Man, but was made of a combination of spider and mutant DNA by the Jackal, using materials found in Mr. Sinister's lab. Wow, the Jackal in Mr. Sinister's lab just sounds like such a dangerous thing. As such, she also had the additional powers to shapeshift into a giant spider with 5 human eyes. While in this shape, she also had the power to spit purple mucus and even fire optic blasts from her eyes. Makes you think there might be some Summers DNA mixed in there, which honestly, if we're talking about Mr. Sinister's lab, I wouldn't be surprised. She ended up rampaging across the city of New York after the Jackal released her as part of a test. Fortunately, she was apprehended by Superior Spider-Man and the X-Men, who explained that she seemed to be a mutant and ended up taking her in after defeating her. We never really heard anything about her after that. Spider-Girl was created by Christopher Yost and Paco Medina. Who knows, maybe we'll see her again, I don't know. Number 1. Forget-Me-Not. Despite the fact that Forget-Me-Not is someone you definitely forget, you may have heard us talk about him on the channel before, because his powers are just so interesting. But for those who haven't heard of him or have simply forgotten him, let's give you a little refresher course. Forget-Me-Not is an X-Men member whose mutant power is that no one can ever remember him. This makes it easier for him to basically infiltrate places, but it makes it harder for him to ever connect with anyone, make a friend, or even have his teammates remember that he's actually on the team. This is why Forget-Me-Not is also usually left off of the official rosters for the team, and why you might never really see his name mentioned there, ever. Forget-Me-Not's psychic powers that enable him to go unnoticed and remain forgotten were actually so strong that even Professor Xavier struggled to remember him, and as it was revealed in X-Men Legacy issue 300, had to place within his mind a psychic hourly reminder just so he wouldn't forget permanently about Forget-Me-Not's existence. If you're wondering what happened to Forget-Me-Not in the end, he was forgotten. So, yeah.
Coming in at number 10 is Dust. Created by Grant Morrison and Ethan Van Sciver for 2002's New X-Men number 133, Soraya Kadir is a young Muslim mutant who enrolled in the Xavier Institute for Higher Learning. She's largely been just a background character in the stories she shows up in, but Dust has been present for some of the largest events in the recent X-Men history. Soraya was even one of the mutants who kept their powers after M-Day. Now, Soraya is usually a pretty shy and quiet girl, but don't let that fool you. Her powers are no joke. Dust is able to transform into a cloud of sand and dust, and even act as a violent sandstorm, literally stripping the flesh from her opponents. When she couldn't properly control her power just yet, Dust even unintentionally flayed 2 men alive after unleashing her power in an act of self-defense. Dust has also been shown to use her power internally, meaning like inside of another person, entering her enemy's lungs and eroding them from the inside out, which is just a lovely thing to think about. But wait, there's more! It also appears that Dust is immune to magic and telepathy-based attacks in her sand form. The only problem is that if you pull out a hose or like a super soaker or something, she's pretty much done for, as she is extremely vulnerable to water. She is a powerful mutant, but sorely underutilized. Number 9. Marrow. Marrow! She's just such an underappreciated mutant considering how versatile and cool her powers are, and if you are a Marrow diehard fan, you know that she's had difficulties with her powers, which might explain part of the reason why people tend to write her off. Initially, Marrow was unable to control the growth of her bones, which leaves her with some pretty painful and frankly terrifying looking struggles. But these days, she's honed her powers and has become quite impressive as a result. Her extreme bone growth allows her to eject super durable spikes from her skin and use them in combat. She's adept at hand-to-hand combat, so this, paired with her ability to literally grow her own spikes and then heal up without issue, makes her pretty unstoppable. Now, you'd be right to think that she isn't exactly a good guy, but for a small amount of time, she was indeed a member of the X-Men until she went a little ragey on Wolverine. Number 8. Eye-Boy. Eye-Boy is usually undervalued because he looks really silly. And it's true, he does look like if Kurt Cobain had like 57 eyes all over his body. But you should never judge a book by its cover, because although Eye-Boy doesn't look very menacing and seems rather confused most of the time, he's actually got a pretty good power set which got him to be part of the X-Men. He's got the ability to see just about anything, no matter how small and no matter how far away. But on top of his microscopic and telescopic vision, he can also see basically every light wave there is, including X-ray, infrared, and thermal, among many others, including being able to see the magical plane as well. As well as night vision and even chemical detection, he can even see pheromone secretions from people, giving him a tracking ability as well. Eye-Boy is just one of those sad cases where he's just too unsettling looking to really garner much respect for who he really is and what he's truly capable of.
Number 7. Dust. Dust is Soraya Kadir. She was enslaved as a child but freed by the X-Men. Originally, she did not want to reveal herself to the mutants and hid herself by turning into scattered sand. When Jean Grey sensed her presence and encouraged Soraya to reveal and introduce herself, she did so by referring to herself as Turab, which is Arabic for dust. She can turn herself into dust and manipulate her body to move at high speeds, causing her to become a deadly sandstorm to her enemies. As sand particles, she can also enter the bodies of other people, causing internal damage. Dust is also resistant to magic and telepathic manipulation or detection while in her sand form. Dust is another person that I feel like we never see enough of in the comics. Someone bring back Dust. Number 6. Layla Miller. Layla's abilities, skills, and powers tend to be pretty specific, which means that she might not inherently seem powerful to readers. Layla has been shown to be able to reanimate beings, heal wounds, and appears to be immune to reality warping. She also has a lot of knowledge about her own future life and the events surrounding it, as she spent time in the future and then returned and uploaded all she had learned into her younger self when she returned to that Layla's present, which I guess was technically her past. Her vast knowledge often comes in handy and is what helped the mutants to figure out who was really after the baby mutant Messiah during the events of Messiah Complex. Her own knowledge has also technically helped her in gaining the knowledge that she is needed to have in order to gain it, if that makes any sense. Timey-wimey stuff. Number 5. Maxime and Manon. Maxime and Manon are twin siblings born to mutant parents. Their powers as such manifested when they were younger than most. They haven't been in a ton of comics, most about probably 11 issues, but they have been shown to be pretty deadly and powerful even as children, both in Extermination and recently in the newest run of New Mutants. Maxime can influence others' emotions, while Manon can alter someone's memories, or recall their memories past. When combined, their powers actually allow them to manipulate the minds of others to the point that they can easily control them, shaping their victims into whatever they like them to be and making them do whatever they want. In issues 3 and 4 of New Mutants, both Maxime and Manon were captured along with Armor, Glob, Angel Salvador, Beak, and the couple's children, but managed to escape. Manon and Maxime helped to free the rest of the group by distracting their captives, manipulating one of them into killing the other. Number 4. Mirage. You might not recognize her mutant name, but if you've seen the New Mutants film, or you are familiar with the New Mutants at all, Mirage will be someone that you maybe know. Mirage is actually Daniel Moonstar. Standard X-Men fans may be less familiar with Dani, but she has also been one of the X-Men, and she is known for her affiliation with the New Mutants crew and all the female defenders who are also known as Valkyror. Dani herself became a Valkyrie when the New Mutants were kidnapped by Amora the Enchantress and taken to to Asgard. So she doesn't just have her mutant power of illusion creation and telepathy, which originally she could only use to recreate the fear of others, but she also has some of the powers granted to Valkyries. Oh, and she can make cool psionic arrows too. Number 3. Darkwind. X-Men teammates really do come in all shapes and sizes. Coming to us from Asgard, we have Dani Moonstar's mighty steed, Brightwind. Remember when Dani joined the Valkyroar after she lost her powers following M-Day? Yeah, it was during that time that she met and bonded with Brightwind. After leaving Asgard and returning to Earth, Brightwind came with her, but instead became known as Darkwind on Earth. So that's why I said Darkwind at the beginning of this point. By extension, he became a member of the X-Men and New Mutants along with Dani. Cute. Number 2. Ariel. Ariel is an alien from the planet known as the Coconut Grove. Her mutant power is persuasion, but due to her alien physiology, she can also teleport. Ariel herself is also related to another Ariel who visited Earth and inspired the character of the same name from William Shakespeare's play, The Tempest. There's a lot of Tempest references in my list today. Ariel, the one we're focusing on with this point, not her ancestor, also ended up on Earth after being sent there on a mission to collect samples from the mutants of Earth for her people to study. They themselves had reached an evolutionary standstill as such and were curious about the Earth mutants and their evolutionary process. It was during her time on Earth that she would meet up with and join the Fallen Angels, and later on in San Francisco would end up meeting the X-Men team and joining them for a time. Number 1. Sunpyre. You know Sunfire, but do you know Sunpyre? Sunpyre was Shiro Yoshida's younger sister, Leu. She also had powers and an attitude similar to her brothers, and first appeared in Uncanny X-Men issue 392 in 2001. For those unfamiliar with Sunfire's or Sunpyre's abilities, both siblings possess the mutant ability of solar flare, which allows them to absorb solar radiation and convert it into superheated plasma. Using this ability, they could both cover their body in flame as they became like a flying, human-shaped sun. Sunpyre can use her power to emit plasma blasts and give off intense solar heat. Leu is one of the mutants who answered a psychic call to help defeat Magneto and save Professor X. After helping out the X-Men in that adventure, she'd later appear again as a member of the X-Corps. It is believed she died in action when the other members of X-Corps turned on her because Mastermind, Martinique Wingard, working in league with Mystique, was controlling them. Number 10. All-female X-Men. Oddly enough, this book didn't do as hot as expected, despite the fact that it was an awesome powerhouse team composed of all ladies. This team was first introduced in 2013's X-Men series in issue number 1, as one of the main X-Men teams, and the series was part of the Marvel Now event. The team featured Kitty Pryde, Rogue, Rachel Summers, Jubilee, and Psylocke, with Storm as the leader. This team was the first in the history of the X-Men to be an all-female team with its own book. So while it was not a commercial success, it's still an important part of X-Men history to be noted for sure. Number 9. Chuck Austin's Uncanny X-Men. At least, I kind of hope you've never heard of this one, because if you have, you probably just forgot about it after years of trying, and now I'm traumatizing you by bringing it back up. This is the team that featured Stacy X. Yeah. I like Stacy X, but I can also see why her character and this run were super problematic. Austin's run on Uncanny X-Men began in issue 410 and ran till issue 443. The problem here wasn't so much to do with the members of the team as the subject matter. Many people feel that Austin's run was hypersexual, and he also gave us the revelation that Nightcrawler's dad was Azazel, which honestly isn't that terrible, but then he also gave us the weird Draco storyline with the X-Men versus the Neopham, which was something. It was a time. All in, this was definitely a controversial run, especially considering the relationship between Husk and Angel. The team was made up of Archangel, Beast, Iceman, Nightcrawler, Stacy X, Wolverine, and Professor X himself to start, but it would later on feature Husk, Polaris, Northstar, Juggernaut, and Havoc. Before we move on to this next spot, just a quick little reminder to click that like button if you haven't already, it really does help us out. Number 8. Children of the Atom. You might not have heard of this one because it isn't even out yet, but this is one of the new teams and books that we had expected to see earlier this year, but due to the global pandemic was delayed and is now delayed again. Originally it was moved to January of 2021, but now we aren't expected to see it till April of 2021. boy, that is a long wait. But just because they aren't around yet doesn't mean we can't talk about them. And if you haven't heard of this team yet, you might want to keep your eye out for when their book is released. Children of the Atom is a team of new teen mutants who are basically X-Men superfans and are trained by these very famous original mutants. Technically, the X-Men team was never meant to exist in Krakoa, as was just revealed recently in the comics, despite them having their own book as part of the Dawn of X line. I know, it's a little confusing. So it'll be interesting to see how the Children of the Atom, who are being advertised as kind of X-Men sidekicks, fit in exactly. In a world where, you know, there's not really supposed to be X-Men? Well, we have yet to meet the members of this team. We do know some of them not only have similar costumes to the classic X-Men, but also have similar powers. Number 7. Mimic. Mimic is a mutant, but one who gained his abilities after knocking over a beaker accidentally in his father's lab, which caused a chemical reaction that created a strange red gas which he then inhaled. His powers allow him to mimic the abilities and skills of other beings within a certain distance of him. Increased exposure to others' abilities seems to also grant him more permanent adaptations of those powers. It wasn't until more recently that it was actually confirmed that Mimic was in fact a mutant during House of X, as suspected since the 90s. Instead, we were led to believe initially that he was a human whose DNA was genetically altered. While not often appearing in the comics, Mimic, aka Calvin Rankin, is a character who has been around since the 60s, if you can believe it, and first appeared in X-Men issue 19, where fans were introduced to him and the question was posed of whether or not Mimic was a mutant or something far worse. Turns out he was a mutant. Mimic is a longtime villain of the X-Men who did for a time play the role of hero and has served on both the heroic X-Men team as well as Norman Osborn's dark X-Men team during the events of Dark Reign. But anyways, I feel like Norman Osborn's team should count, so if we do a part 5, expect me to get into some of that. Number 6. Warbird. Warbird is a pretty unique character, having been born as a member of the Shi'ar Empire, but not knowing her parents. Her mother was an alien who was taken captive and who was killed by giving birth to Avidara, who would grow up to be Warbird. Her mother's reproductive organs basically were not compatible with the Shi'ar, and so she did not survive the pregnancy. Avidara would grow up to become a Shi'ar warrior and join the prestigious Warbirds, whose job it was to guard the royal family. Warbird is not a mutant, but would work alongside the X-Men team and cross paths with them while being tasked with guarding over Kid Gladiator. She first appeared in Wolverine and the X-Men in issue number 1. Number 5. Spiral. Spiral has been an enemy of the X-Men, but would also become a member of Storm and Psylocke's X-Force team. She was a human known as Rita Hayward, who would end up in the Mojoverse and become part of a time paradox, having been attacked by her future mutated self, Spiral. Originally, she was a stunt woman who ended up falling in love with Longshot during his time on Earth and returned with him to the Mojoverse. When his plan to defeat Mojo failed, Rita was captured and was modified by Mojo to have 6 arms, one of which was completely cybernetic. Spiral herself is part cyborg, part human mutate as a result of the modifications performed on her. She was also the one responsible, acting as an agent of Mojo, for giving Psylocke her cybernetic eyes. True facts. Number 4. Shark Girl. Seriously, Wolverine and the X-Men has such a fun group of characters in it. If you haven't checked it out, you need to check it out. Ira Dos Santos is one of that group. She first appeared in issue 20 of the series and has also been referred to as Were-Shark before, which is pretty fitting. As both names would imply, she is basically part shark, part human, and that's also her mutation. Shark Girl is one of the mutants who appeared following the dispersion of the Phoenix Force. When her powers first manifested, both the Brotherhood and the X-Men attempted to recruit her to their causes. She refused both offers and was later kidnapped by Mystique, who attempted to then recruit her using force, basically. Fortunately, she was saved by Angel and would eventually agree to attend the Jean Grey School of Higher Learning. Shark Girl can transform into a full shark and can also transform into a part shark, part human, basically like a land shark. While in these forms, she can survive either underwater or on land and has enhanced strength, stamina, and speed. Number 3. Adam X. We are going back to the crazy Summers family tree for this one. Adam X is the half-brother of Cyclops, Havoc, and Vulcan. His mother is Catherine Summers, but his father was the emperor of the Shi'ar Empire, Emperor Deken Naramani. Adam X first came on the scene in the 90s, and to hear his story, you'd easily be able to peg him as a 90s character. Trust. He was abducted when he was just a baby from the genetic lab in which he was created by Jonath, who became became his adoptive father and raised him. Growing up, his mutant powers would manifest, which allowed him to basically set others' blood on fire, burning them from the inside out, which already sounds like such a 90s power in my mind. He can also ignite his own blood, which is very painful, but grants him a speed boost. Adam would then learn that he was a hybrid being, part Shi'ar, part mutant. Number 2. Petra. Petra has the ability to manipulate rocks and rock formations. She can cause earthquakes and even use her powers to create diamonds. In fights, she can bind her opponents or completely destroy them by having the earth move to swallow them, and she can transform rocks into different kinds of weapons and wield them against her opponents, sending them hurtling towards them. Petra was recruited by Moira McTaggart after being apprehended by the police. Her family died in a rock slide when she was young, which to this day Petra actually wonders if she caused. Following that, she was moved into the foster care system, but after her adoptive father attempted to assault her, she used her powers to escape him and became a runaway. She discovered her ability to turn coal into diamonds, and she would later exchange these diamonds for a place to sleep, but eventually this kind of drew suspicion, and she was later tracked down and then taken in by the police. Fortunately, Moira arranged for her to be released, and then of course offered her a place as part of her team. Number 1. Sway. I love Sway. Her powers are just so cool and her origin is so tragic. I feel so bad for Sway, but I'm also like, these powers are awesome. I love the way that they're phrased. I love the way that they're used. It's neat. Sway's powers manifested when she was just a teenager. While visiting New York City in preparation for college, Suzanne's parents and herself ended up in the wrong place at the wrong time, and they were gunned down during an attack that was basically part of a gang war. While Suzanne's parents were killed in the attack, she miraculously survived, due to the manifestation of her powers, which allowed her to manipulate the flow of time. She had instinctively stopped the bullets that would have hit her in midair, but she didn't have the experience or the understanding yet required to save her parents. Sway's powers allow her to control and manipulate time in her nearby vicinity. She can also rewind the temporal memory of a location, allowing her to basically review past events. It was using her powers that she was able to track down her parents' killers and report them to the police, helping them to apprehend those criminals. And revealing her abilities to the officers, she was basically put in contact with Moira McTaggart, and then of course ended up joining up with the X-Men. And that's also how Petra, Sway, and Vulcan all know each other. In case you read any of the new stuff and been like, who are these ladies, if you missed Deadly Genesis. Number 10. Binary. Carol Danvers as Miss Marvel ended up in a fight with Rogue that left her zapped of her powers and her memories. During the tussle, Carol was thrown from the Golden Gate Bridge, but fortunately Jessica Drew, aka Spider-Woman, showed up to save the day. Unfortunately, when Carol came to, it was apparent that her memories had been wiped. Spider-Woman reached out to the X-Men for help, and for a time, Carol Danvers became part of that team. Professor X was able to help restore Carol's memories, but her emotional attachments to those memories would remain lost. It was during her time adventuring with the X-Men that she would become binary after a space adventure with the team saw her cross paths with the Brood, who exposed her to an evolutionary ray that tapped into her latent potential. True story. Number 9. Longshot. Longshot is a paradoxal hero. He ended up joining the X-Men after being sent to Earth by Mojo so that he would forget all that had passed before that, like the part where he almost defeated Mojo. Without his memories, Longshot showed up in the X-Men's danger room and would end up befriending them and serving as an ally and a teammate. He is the father of Shatterstar, who he had with X-Men member Dazzler, but was also made from Shatterstar's DNA, creating a paradox and a strange time loop when it comes to his origins and his creation. Longshot got his name during his time on Earth, which was given to him because of his fighting style. Longshot always taking the long shot, the less likely, more desperate path of success in fights. Longshot, however, can do this as while not a mutant but being engineered from the DNA of one. He possesses probability altering powers which grant him a bit of luck. He also has enhanced speed, strength, agility, and endurance, which he often uses to fight with using throwing knives. Longshot is also known for his super handsome powers that cause many people he meets to instantly fall for him. And before we move on to this next spot, just a quick reminder, if you love X-Men truly as much as I love X-Men, then be sure to show that love by giving this video a thumbs up. It really does help us out here at the channel, so thank you if you already did that. Number 8. Surge. Surge grew up homeless on the streets of New York after running away from her home when her powers first manifested. Far away apparently, as she was born initially in Tokyo, and her parents still live there. Her powers cause her to absorb electricity from all nearby sources at all times, without the ability to stop, even zapping electricity out of the air. She can then discharge this energy through blasts or by using it to give herself bursts of super speed. Noriko Ashida's powers are hard for her to control and are considered volatile, which is why Beast created gauntlets for her that helped her to control them when she was later welcomed into the Xavier Institute, after initially being turned away.
Number 7. Spore. Andrew Grace developed his unique mutation at a pretty young age. Now what was that mutation, you ask? Well, for starters, he had a very animal-like appearance, kinda like Bigfoot, but that's not all, because his real ability was that he was able to control people's moods and actions through pheromones. Growing up with an abusive father who forced his mother to kill herself, Andrew grew up with an intense hatred for humans, and began using his powers to make others turn on each other and kill each other. He eventually adopted the name Spore and became a member of the Acolytes, and as a member of the team, countless civilians and innocent people lost their lives. For a time, he was a prisoner of Excalibur as Dr. Rory Campbell wanted to cure Spore, but during the treatment, Rory's latent hatred of mutants got the better of him, and Spore manipulated Rory into an aggressive attack on him, which gave him the opportunity to escape. Sadly, though, this escape wasn't permanent, as he eventually made his way back onto the island and was killed during a Sentinel attack. It was revealed later that Spore's motives for killing were a lot darker and sadder than we originally thought, though. Spore just hated himself as much as other humans, and in his mind felt that killing humans was very wrong and that he therefore deserved to be killed himself. Check him out for yourself, starting with 1993's Uncanny X-Men, number 300. Number 6. Barrage. Another one of the original recruits of the Dark Riders of the Storm on this list today. If you're not familiar with Barrage, he had the ability to transform his forearms into organic weapons capable of collecting ambient energy, and then firing it into powerful explosive blasts. Barrage served as an agent of Apocalypse and seemed to follow him no matter what the task was given, as he was a part of the attack on X-Factor's ship and the attack on the Inhuman city on the moon. Alongside the other members of the Dark Riders, Barrage switched sides and served under Strife after he was able to best Apocalypse, and they defended Strife's moon base from the X-Men and mortally wounded the unfit Apocalypse in combat. After Strife's death, the Riders traveled the world challenging any and all mutants, killing Mesmero and even their own Synapse in the process, as they were too weak to even be considered worthy of living. Barrage was one of the few members of the Riders to survive the massacre by Wolverine because he actually wasn't a part of the team at the time. Honestly, lucky him. Fast forward a bit and the Dark Riders, including Barrage, embarked on a journey to kill mutant healers after a Terrigen mist cloud was spread throughout the world, endangering mutant kind, believing that the event was to be a test of strength so that only the strongest would survive. When they attacked the healer Shen Zorn, they were caught off guard by his display of ultimate power, which unfortunately cost Barrage his life. Check him out starting with 1991's X Factor, number 65. Number 5. Whiteout. Now I'm really starting to sense a pattern here because extremely little is known about Whiteout and her past. A lot of it is just, assuming and speculation. We do know what her power is though. Whiteout possesses the superhuman ability to project a flash of blinding white light from her body. This light renders her opponents blind for approximately 1 minute, and for some unknown reason her power only affects victims that she chooses, and not everyone within the range, meaning it can be used very tactically. So like I said before, a lot of her past life is speculated, but it's assumed that she has resided in the Savage Land for some time, and it was there that she was recruited by the mutant Zaladane to join her forces of the Savage Land mutants. In her only known mission for Zaladane, Whiteout and the other Savage Land mutants attacked the X-Men in Chile while they were looking for Polaris. The X-Men defeated the Savage Land mutates pretty easily in this battle, and Whiteout presumably just fled. Check out more of her for yourself, starting with her first appearance in 1989's Uncanny X-Men, number 249. Number 4. Fever Pitch. Real name unknown, Fever Pitch was a very handsome young man until his mutant powers manifested and he accidentally destroyed his own face. Thanks to his mutant powers, his entire body is made of an organic flame that allows him to radiate intense heat, fly, and discharge and throw explosive plasma. As the years went by and his powers became stronger, he eventually burned through his entire body, leaving him nothing more but a fiery skeleton, which ultimately led him to becoming a member of the incarnation of Gene Nation, organized and led by the Dark Beast. Fever Pitch was seemingly killed on his first mission by Nate Gray after his energy was siphoned off, but he did later resurface in Berlin trying to capture Abyss so that he could sell him off to some researchers. Now skip ahead a little bit and we see Fever Pitch classified by the government as a national security threat, as he was one of the few mutants to keep his powers after the decimation of the mutant population. He was one of the many mutants to have a tracking chip implanted in his head before a trip into Salem Center. When the chip's true nature was discovered, he had it removed by Mr. M, who he followed when he led an exodus from the Institute. Fever Pitch was later captured by the anti-mutant group the Sapien Sapien League and was injected with a dose of the legacy virus, causing his powers to straight up overload, killing hundreds including himself. Check out his whole story starting with his first appearance all the way back in 1999's Generation X, number 50. Number 3, the Nasty Boys. Comprised of Mr. Sinister, Ruckus, Multiple Man, Slab, Gorgeous George, Hairbag, and Ramrod, the Nasty Boys were the strike force organized by Mr. Sinister to take down the X-Men. The Nasty Boys made their first appearance all together battling the X-Factor after Slab initially attacked Strong Guy. After losing this battle, Sinister posed as Steven Shafran and unveiled his plan to kill the Scarlet Witch. Shafran, obviously upset, attempted to kill him only to be killed himself. During all that, Ramrod was also deported from the country but did make his way back, illegally. Needless to say, this is a very busy group. The team was later regrouped by Sinister and they hunted Malice, who was trying to kill Polaris, so that they couldn't re-merge, and they didn't stop this hunt until Malice was apparently destroyed by Polaris herself and Havoc. A while later, the team decided to reform during the final days of mutant kind after X-Man's return that ended in the death of most of the X-Men. Now, it was revealed to be a bait set up by the upstarts to lure out the remaining X-Men, which they were not aware of, and they were all promptly killed by the upstarts. Check out these nasty boys for yourself, starting with 1992's X Factor, number 75. Number 2, Forearm. Michael McCain, aka Forearm, was one of the founding members of the Mutant Liberation Front, a team of disillusioned and rebellious mutant youth. Now, Michael is called Forearm for pretty obvious reasons, but I will explain his powers a bit for you anyways. He has 4 arms, hence, the name. And thanks to this mutation, he also possesses superhuman strength, stamina, and durability. Now, one of their first missions under the leadership of Strife was to liberate the incarcerated New Mutants members Rusty and Skids, and the team broke them out of prison, and the pair joined the MLF out of just straight up confusion. Skip ahead a bit, and the MLF travels to Muir Island, where they meant to steal the legacy virus data, but while they were there, they learned about the Xavier protocols and decided to steal them instead. The team was confronted by Excalibur though, and they were quickly teleported away empty-handed. After a second attempt to steal the legacy virus, Forearm left the team as he felt betrayed by Moonstar, who revealed herself to be an undercover SHIELD agent. He later resurfaced as a part of a fighting championship in Madripoor called Bloodsport, where superpowered opponents fought to the death. However, in an unfortunate turn of events, Forearm was killed during a fight with former Serpent Society member Anaconda, who just broke his neck. Oddly enough though, he was somehow able to recover from death and made an appearance as a member of the MLF once more not too long after. Give a story read starting with 1990's New Mutants number 86. And number 1, Executioner. Now, with a name like Executioner, you can probably guess what this guy is all about. Carl Denty was a field agent for the FBI whose partner Fred Duncan was a member of Charles Xavier's Underground, who would cache the technological equipment that the X-Men confiscated from alien races. After his partner's death, Carl inherited all of the equipment and decided that mutants had caused way too much damage in the world, so he donned a lot of the equipment and started calling himself the Executioner, beginning his quest to punish mutants who had not been legally convicted of their crimes. Starting off with killing the mutant tower, Denty quickly teleported away once the X-Men arrived on the scene to stop him, but he was smart and decided to teleport to the X-Mansion to kill the comatose Emma Frost. However, he wasn't smart enough because he was still stopped by Cyclops and Cable. Now, none of that deterred him though, because he still continues his mission of punishing mutants. However, for a while he actually did some good as he teamed up with the Punisher in Washington DC to protect the pro-mutant activist Reverend James Conover from the Mutant Liberation Front. This act landed him the position of potential recruit for the initiative. However, who knows if he was ever actually on that team, because that was one of the last times we saw him. Check out his story for yourself, starting with 1993's Uncanny X-Men Annual, number 1993.
Number 10, Candy Southern. While Candy wasn't necessarily a member, she did help the X-Men and made her first appearance in X-Men issue 31 in the 60s. She was a longtime friend of Angel's and would later end up dating Warren. She also would team up with the X-Men to help find Warren when he went missing after learning of the fellow mutant team's existence, and Warren Worthington III's role as Hero Angel on the team. Candy would later break up with Warren and was killed by X-Factor enemy and former friend Cameron Hodge. Candace Southern wasn't a mutant and didn't have any powers, but she was skilled in business. I personally would love to see her somehow be resurrected and return to the comics in the new X-Corp series, working alongside the mutants as a human ally in business. That could be pretty cool. Number 9, Brew! Brew is one of my favorite of the more obscure X-Men members. He is a mutant of the Brood alien race. Brood are basically terrifying, violent, and love hurting others. Bru, however, is very different from the rest of his race, being a mutant. His mutant power is actually compassion or empathy. Unlike the rest of his species, he doesn't enjoy hurting others and, in fact, is more inclined to try and help others instead. Aww. Basically, he's a big brood sweetheart. Recently in the comics, Bru accidentally became the new brood king after consuming the king egg, and just in time too, as the mutant nation was in the midst of being overrun with invading brood at the time. Consuming the king egg allowed Bru to tap into and basically control the hive mind, becoming the leader of his species. And if you missed out on that whole fun adventure, you can check it out in the newest X-Men series. That's where that all went down, and it was pretty exciting to read. Bru initially appeared in the 2004 Astonishing X-Men series in issue 40, and would later team up with and be taken in by the X-Men, joining the Jean Grey School for Higher Learning. He'd also get to have like a really fun day with Tony Stark, which is another fun Bru adventure. And before we move on to this next spot, just a quick reminder, if you love X-Men as much as I love X-Men, which is a lot, be sure to show that love by giving this video a thumbs up. And why not hit that subscribe as well while you're down there. Number 8. Vulcan. Vulcan is the retcon youngest brother of Alex and Scott Summers, aka Havoc and Cyclops. He was introduced during X-Men Deadly Genesis and was revealed to be one of the mutants who was part of Charles Xavier's original and formerly unknown rescue mission to save his team from Krakoa. Vulcan was the name he'd chosen for himself, though his name was originally Gabriel Summers. When Catherine Summers was kidnapped, she was pregnant with Gabriel, but he was taken from her womb and put in an incubation accelerator. Once fully grown, he was intended to be used as the Shi'ar Emperor's servant, but he escaped and was found and recruited by Moira McTaggart to join the X-Men. Vulcan's powers are similar to both his brothers and involve energy manipulation. He is considered an Omega level mutant and is capable of absorbing energy and dispelling it in the form of blasts. He can also use the energy to heal, fly, create constructs, manipulate objects, and as a form of sustenance. Number 7. Morph. Because there are multiple morphs out there, not everyone is as familiar with Benjamin Deeds as the morph who appeared in the animated X-Men series from the 90s. This version of Morph, however, is a lot less cocky in comparison to that animated series version. Benjamin Deeds is a mutant who, like the animated version, can transform into anyone else. However, his powers are a little more unique than most shapeshifters. The more time he spends with someone, the more his appearance will grow to mimic theirs, not really becoming an exact duplicate of them, but more becoming his own version of that person, which also affects how that person sees him. Using his powers also makes the person he resembles both more eager to like and to trust Morph. And actually, initially I believe Morph didn't even like that codename. They were like, you should be Morph, and he was like, meh, nah. Number 6. Thunderbird. While we haven't seen Neil Shara in a while, he was listed as a member of the X-Men in the Ten of Swords handbook, and while it's since been revealed that the X-Men were originally made defunct after Krakoa came to be during Dawn of X, they saw their return during the denouement of the Ten of Swords event in their own series, X-Men, which had been going on since Dawn of X in the comics, comically, despite the team no longer being technically recognized by the Quiet Council. So it's really weird. It's like we had an X-Men series, but like no one acknowledged that the X-Men team existed. Anyways, they're back now, sort of. Thunderbird could also appear again at some point as part of X Corporation, as Neil has also been a part of that team in the past. While he's not the most recognizable mutant to use the codename Thunderbird, Neil is still one of those mutants. His abilities allow him to convert ambient heat into solar plasma, turning his entire body into this type of plasma, which gives him a variety of abilities and powers, including emitting focused plasma beams and flight. Number 5. Cypher. You know about Cypher, but do you know about Cypher? With an I, not with a Y, just to be clear. Cypher is Elisa Tager and has powers similar to mutant Kitty Pryde. That is, she can phase, and even float or fly while in her phased state. She was part of the Jean School for Higher Learning and was initially discovered by mutant Cyclops, Jean Grey, and Zorn. Cypher also can turn herself invisible both visually and psychically. Well, almost completely invisible psychically. Almost. Immensely powerful telepaths such as Jean Grey have still been shown as being able to sense her. Although Cypher has only made a few appearances here and there in the comics, she still managed to make her way onto the young X-Men team and has even reappeared on Krakoa. Number 4. Ink. Ink is another member of the X-Men who technically isn't a mutant. It was believed initially that his mutant ability was to gain powers from his tattoos. However, it was later revealed that it was Eric Gitter, aka Ink's tattoo artist, who was the mutant and who basically imbued Eric with these powers using his own mutant ability. Ink's tattoo artist was Leon Nunez, a mutant with no codename really, simply being known by his name or known as the tattoo artist. Ink would be recruited as one of the young X-Men, initially believing he was working for Cyclops, but later learning he was in fact working for a disguised Donald Pierce. Ink fought alongside his fellow X-Men, but would leave the team for a time later on after discovering that he wasn't truly a mutant, when he found out where his powers really came from. When his fellow teammates needed his help, however, he would return armed with more tattoos from his artist. The Ten of Swords handbook listed him as an active member of the X-Men, so, you know, he's there, he could be back again, I don't know. I feel like I haven't seen Ink in a while, but he's out there. Number 3. Battle of the Atom Future X-Men. While everyone might focus on the Battle of the Atom Future Brotherhood team, as Reyes has a tendency to steal the show, plus My Girl Zorn Jean, and also featuring Molly Hayes, people tend to forget about the awesomeness that was the Future X-Men team. The real X-Men team. This team featured a much more skilled Iceman, who now was known as Ice Wizard, Wiccan, who had become Sorcerer Supreme, Chimera, who is believed to be Storm's daughter that she had with Black Panther, Shogo, Jubilee's son, known as Sentinel X, Colossus armed with Magic Soul Sword, Kid Omega as Phoenix, and Jubilee as Wolverine. Number 2. Extreme Sanctions Executive, the other XSE. This team also spiraled out of the team that we talked about previously on part 1 of this list, Extreme X-Men. XSE here stands for the Extreme Sanctions Executive. Similar to the original XSE that Bishop was a part of in the future, this team is also like a military police force meant to maintain and in some cases enforce peace is kept between mutants and humans. Storm was asked to create the team by the United Nations and eventually would increase its numbers by recruiting the rest of her X-Men, making this team another government-sanctioned mutant team, like X-Factor was, and still one of the first of those types of teams. Team members have included Bishop, Cannonball, Magma, Rachel Summers is on every team, I love it, Psylocke, Rogue, Sage, Wolverine, X-23, and Gambit. Number 1. X-Animals. If you're an intense X-Men fan, you may be familiar with Mojo's X-Babies, but are you familiar with his other attempts at recreating or recasting Marvel's 616 X-Men after they were believed dead? One such team that attempted to step in was the X-Animals. This was a team of, well, animals, who each took on the role of a different mutant member of the X-Men. We've got a skunk standing in for Rogue, a bulldog for Wolverine, a pig for Dazzler, a rabbit as Havoc, a cat for our Storm, which I kinda love, a bird, possibly a hawk as Longshot, an otter as Psylocke, and a gorilla as Colossus. Sadly, this team was not acceptable as a replacement in Mojo's opinion, and he got rid of them. But I'd love to see them return at some point, if that's possible. Number 10. Prodigy. I feel like a lot of people maybe forgot about Prodigy, as he's been MIA for some time in the comics, and was depowered during the events of M-Day. But with the magic of Krakoa and Dawn of X, he was able to return to us, being resurrected and also regaining his powers. 1. Prodigy happens to be a super genius, but this is also because he's a telepath with the ability to basically mimic anyone's skill set and share their knowledge while nearby. This has also been shown in the past to extend to fighting precognition, where he can basically use his abilities to read a person and predict their next move of attack in a battle, which is pretty sweet. He often also builds his own advanced tech, and even when depowered is known to possess a great level of intellect, making him a challenging adversary whether or not he has his mutant abilities. Even as a depowered mutant, you might not want to mess with him. Number 9. Lady Mastermind. Lady Mastermind, aka Reagan Wingard, recently popped back up in the giant-sized Nightcrawler comics and was welcomed into the mutant nation of Krakoa. Some, however, may not know or appreciate her mutant history and background. Just who is Lady Mastermind? Well, she's the daughter of Jason Wingard, aka the original villain known as Mastermind. Her powers take after her father's, allowing her to create realistic illusions projected into her target's minds. While she also has an even lesser known suspected half-sister, Reagan's powers are often depicted as being the more powerful between the two, with it even being said that her abilities are even more strong stronger than her father's. Additionally, she is also fairly skilled in hand-to-hand combat, a skill set her father actually very much lacked. He was hilarious in a fight. He's like a rag doll. Sorry, Mastermind. Number 8. Gentle. Gentle is a mutant with the abilities of super strength. I know, very hilarious considering his name. He can grant himself immediate muscle mass that basically allows him to change size and increase his strength when needed. It is yet unknown just how strong Gentle can make himself, and he is also known for being someone who could potentially even take on the Hulk, although he is more of a pacifist, hence his name. Gentle's real name is Nesno Abidemi. I hope I'm saying that right. Nesno Abidemi. I'm sorry if I'm saying it wrong. It's a hard one to say. He was raised in Wakanda, but always felt like an outsider because his father was Russian. When his mutant abilities surfaced, it was actually Aurora Monroe Storm, who was queen at the time in Wakanda, who encouraged him to be sent to the Xavier Institute so he could learn how to better control his powers. His vibranium tattoos are also meant to help him to control those powers. Also, vibranium tattoos are super cool, but I think they're also super painful to get, so maybe don't get them. You can't, because it's not a real substance, but still. Number 7. Manifold. Manifold is probably one of the most powerful teleporters we have out there, and he isn't even really technically a teleporter. Manifold's powers allow him to communicate with the universe and basically ask it to bend over backwards to do his bidding. He can just ask the universe to literally fold itself in half so that he can jump from one point to another point, because it's been folded, moving even all the way across the universe and beyond, seemingly teleporting but really just communicating with the cosmos. The only downside to his powers is that because they're about communicating with the universe, he can really only do this within the 616 reality, because that's his universe. Recently, Manifold was part of the mutant adjacent Sword team. Number 6. Silhouette. Silhouette is actually an awesome mutant. She is one of the few mutants who retained her powers after M-Day and is known as a magical or mystical mutant. Her powers originate from the universal spring known as the Well of All Things. She is the child of a Cambodian woman named Miami and an American man named Andrew Cord. Silhouette is both her alias and her birth name, and she is believed to be part of a group of descendants who are destined to have power and to unite the east and western ways of the world. After being partially paralyzed by a gunshot, Silhouette was forced to fight while using crutches, but this has never stopped her from kicking serious butt with a combination of dark force energy, teleportation, and impressive martial arts skills. Even when she has her crutches, actually, which I love. Love to see it. Number 5. Vulcan. Despite being one of the most powerful mutants around who is considered to be Omega level, Vulcan actually hasn't appeared as much. Some of the other more popular, but honestly, in most cases, less powerful mutants. Vulcan's mutant powers are energy manipulation and absorption. Despite his insane power levels, he tends to somehow be the lesser known of all of the Summers brothers. He has also demonstrated the ability to absorb his opponent's powers as well and use them for himself on rare occasions. That's OP. Vulcan is the youngest Summers brother, also known as Gabriel or Gabe Summers, and we only learned of his existence in 2006 when he first appeared in the comic X-Men Deadly Genesis issue number 1. Yet he is considered the most powerful of those three. Despite him technically being from Earth, Vulcan mainly grew up in space in a stasis pod where his aging was accelerated until the point of peak adolescence. Number 4. Tempo. Tempo is super cool. Having seen a little bit more of her through the Marauder series, I have been greatly impressed by her power set, I gotta say. Tempo basically has the power to manipulate and in a way control time. She can speed it up, slow it down, she can change the tempo of it, if you will, and can manipulate it in her own way. Time control to me is something that has always been super powerful. We don't see a lot of mutants that have that power, we don't see a lot of heroes that have that power. Did you know Tempo was actually one of the mutants who you could have voted for the X-Men elections in recent years? Yep, she received a nomination. However, she sadly did not win the vote, and as a result, she didn't get to be on the team. Sad. But at least she did get to be on the one-shot secret X-Men team, which I actually thought was pretty cool. I actually enjoyed that little one-shot. And later on, she would end up joining, of course, the Marauders. Number 3. X-People. You probably forgot about this team just because their name is, well, super forgettable. But they are actually from a very memorable alternate universe, the MC2, or also known as Alternate Earth 982. This Earth is the home of the beloved Mayday Parker, aka Spider-Girl, now known as Spider-Woman. But you know what's not so memorable from that universe? Their version of the X-Men. I mean, I get that X-People is meant to be gender neutral, more inclusive, but is that really the best name they could come up with? There has to be something that isn't X-Men that is better than that. I mean, I know there is because we have dozens of other X teams with the letter X in them that are way more catchy than X-People. Because of the Earth it is set in, X-People is a team of originally younger mutants who are now older and taking on the role of leaders, mentors, and teachers. Actually, here Jubilee is the team leader, with her core team roster including Simeon, Angry Eagle, Torque, and Spanner. Number 2. Factor 3. Factor 3? That sounds like some kind of toothpaste. This is another villainous team composed of mutants but led by an alien known as Mutant Master. You might not remember it because it was only around for a few issues and also first appeared way early on in X-Men issue 28 back in 1967. This team popped up a few times and would often force mutants into doing their bidding, often mind-controlling Banshee to attempt to kidnap or help kidnap Professor X. What a wacky time it was. Fortunately, in issue 39, Factor 3 was defeated for good and hasn't bothered the X-Men since. So we haven't seen them for a really long time. Number 1. Lightning Force. This X-Men team comes to us admittedly from an alternate reality, which might be why you've never heard of it before. But once you learn about them, you'll likely wish they had remained forgotten. Lightning Force is an X-Men team that we come across in the Exiles, who themselves belong to Earth 597. They are basically the alternate Excalibur team from their reality, a reality where the Axis won World War II. I think you know where we're going with this. Their roster is almost as surprising as the whole idea for this team. We have Herr Xavier, who helped to create the team through experimenting on them. Yikes. And leading the team, we have Hauptmann England, aka Captain Britain, with Magon, aka Gloriana, Shadowcat, and Nightcrawler. Also, if you were wondering, yes, Kitty Pryde is still Jewish in this reality, which yeah, makes her character's history here pretty dark. Number 10. Karma. Karma is a mutant with very specific powers, so it should surprise no one that she is part of the New Mutants team. I actually love the New Mutants for this reason. A lot of their members tend to be forgotten and yet are super powerful when their abilities are properly utilized. Xian Koiman possesses limited telepathic abilities, but can have a strong sense of sort of psychic projection. Karma can emit a wave of energy that disables her target's consciousness, allowing her to take over control of their body, experiencing what they experience as though she were actually in their body, sensing what they taste, hear, smell, see, and feel. Those she controls will awaken unaware, afterwards experiencing this possession as if they had just been in a dream and basically had been sleepwalking. She can also do this on a mass scale, possessing multiple people, though she must overcome many challenges in order to fluidly control multiple people at once. Number 9. Hijack. Hijack is David Bond, a technopath mutant who can use his abilities to telepathically control any vehicle. He has used his powers to control massive sentinels and even control an entire helicarrier. The rule seems to be if you can steer it, fly it, or drive it, Hijack can control it. Although it has been implied that the vehicle in question likely needs to have some kind of mechanical makeup, so sailboats are probably not something Bond could manipulate, unless you had a sailboat that also had an engine, which I think is a thing now. I don't think all sailboats are just sails. Still, in a world where we are surrounded by tech and tons of engine-powered vehicles, David Bond's abilities are pretty powerful. Alas, he has only appeared in less than 50 issues of comics. Someone tell me, where is David Bond now? Where is he on Krakoa? Is he there? I want to see him. Number 8. Summoner. Summoner is a new mutant whose name also signifies the type of mutant that they are. They are the child of Apocalypse's first horsemen of war. Arakko, the landmass itself, was drawn to Krakoa and Krakoa to it. The two fused together to increase the size of the land overall, although Arakko is not yet considered safe and is basically known as kind of the monster territory part of Krakoa. I mean, technically it still isn't Krakoa, but they're attached now, so they are each other. Summoner's abilities allow them to summon the dark beasts of Arakko. We don't know too much about them yet because they've only been in a few issues, but what we do know is that they can withstand the blast of one of Cable's thermal grenades, his last one in fact, without taking virtually any damage. So overall, they seem like they're going to be pretty crazy and powerful. X of Swords, I'm assuming we're going to see more about them. Number 7. Weapon H. Weapon H isn't an organization, but instead is the codename for the character known as Clayton Cortez. Clayton is an ex-military merc who turned on his employers, and as a result, he was captured and sold as a test subject to the Weapon X program, formerly known as the Weapon Plus program. They experimented on him and turned him into a Wolverine-Hulk hybrid known by many different codenames, including H-Alpha, Weapon H, and you guessed it, Hulkverine. His transformation ends up bringing Wolverine and Hulk together, who attempt to hunt him down before realizing that Weapon H himself is also a victim and attempting to help free him from the leader's control. Clayton is not your typical mutant, as he doesn't have an inherent X gene, but is pretty cool in that he's a lab-made mutant who is also a gamma mutate and a cyborg. He's so many things, really. Number 6. Peeper. Peeper is one of my favorite mutants, known as Peeper or Peepers. I tend to love mutants whose powers seem less than super, and Peeper is honestly one of those mutants. Peeper is a mutant who, honestly, all the other mutant stars that he's interacted with recently have been super sweet to, and I appreciate that. I love to see it. Peeper's powers have to do with his physical mutation, which is that he has enlarged eyes. With his eyes, he can see things that others can't, possessing different forms of sight. Recently, Peeper was using his powers to help out his fellow teammates as a member of Swords the Six, although he was not part of the main Six team, as he's not a teleporter, and the main Six of the Six or rather were a teleportation team. Instead, he worked with Sword to help expand the areas of mutant technology. Number 5. Tag. Tag is definitely one of the weirdest mutants out there when it comes to his abilities. Let me tell you about it. He is Brian Cruz, a mutant whose powers allow him to tag someone psionically, inciting a telepathic urge to either run away or run towards that person. Basically, he is the childhood game tag personified. If you took the game Tag from your childhood and you made said game a person who had mutant abilities in Marvel Comics, this is what you would get. Tag could use his powers to tag multiple people at a time, but if making them emit a psionic signal that encouraged others around them to run away, the range would actually top out at about 100 meters. Once at that distance, the urge to run away would then cease. Number 4. Adam X. We are going back to the crazy Summers family tree for this one. Oh boy, which if you haven't checked out that video, we got videos on that. Oh my gosh. What a time putting that together for you all. Adam X is the half-brother of Cyclops, Havoc, and Vulcan. His mother is Catherine Summers, but his father was the Emperor of the Shi'ar Empire, Emperor Deken Naramani. Adam X's story clearly establishes the era of the comics that he hails from. See if you can guess when he first appeared before I finish this origin. Okay, you got a little bit more time. He was abducted when he was just a baby from the genetic lab in which he was created by Jonath, who became his adoptive father and raised him. Growing up, his mutant powers would manifest, which allowed him to basically set others' blood on fire, burning them from the inside out. He can also ignite his own blood, which is very painful, but grants him a speed boost, so there you go. Adam would then learn that he was a hybrid being, part Shi'ar, part mutant, and if all this made a 90s alarm go off in your mind, you would be right, he is an extremely 90s character. Number 3. Spore. Spore was apparently a super ancient evil that was created by the Deviants way back as a weapon to be used against the Eternals. However, Spore didn't just do harm to Eternals, but to all living things it came in contact with. As such, Spore was condemned by the Celestials and killed long ago. Or so they thought. After appearing to have been destroyed, Spore actually lived on through the soil below, in the spot where he was defeated. Eventually, through this soil, he was able to return through substances that were grown in it and used for experimentation on people like Roughhouse. In fact, Roughhouse ended up being infected and had to be saved later on by Wolverine as a result. Wolverine and his mutant friend Bandera ended up fighting against Spore with some help from the people of Tierra Verde and Sister Salvation, who possibly herself was a mutant. It's not really fully established, but it's suggested. While defeated, a small piece of Spore would apparently survive, having resurfaced recently, albeit somewhat randomly, in the 2020 volume of Iron Man in issue number 22. So that's a thing. I don't think Spore's done anything yet, but he's still apparently around somehow. Number 2, the Viscora. The Viscora are more than just one character. They are a bunch of them. A whole race, if you will. They made their first appearance in 2020's Cable issue number 5, where they appeared as an antagonistic alien race. They have only made a handful of appearances, only appearing, I believe, in Knights of X since then, and 2 issues of that miniseries. The Viscora were the reason that Sword initially went offline and disappeared. Their goal is to travel the cosmos looking for new worlds to absorb into their collective consciousness, learning everything they can about them before completely cleansing said world, or possibly said universe, wiping out everything within its existence. This was their intention with Earth and the main continuity, but in Cable they were initially stopped by Kid Cable and his parents, Cyclops and Jean Grey. Number 1, Brimstone Love. Whether we're talking about the Brimstone Love of Earth 928 or the Brimstone Love of Earth 616, both are pretty obscure to be honest. The original Brimstone Love, who first appeared in the Earth 928 reality, only made 8 appearances, while the main continuity version of the character has only made 3 appearances. Both are the leader and man behind the Theater of Pain. Tragically, while Brimstone Love was a newer villain to the Earth 616 continuity, making his first appearance in the first annual issue number 1 of the second volume of Marauders from 2022, he also probably won't be seen again if you haven't seen him yet. This is because Brimstone Love perishes, or at least is believed to have perished, as of the end of the Marauders run, issue number 12. That Marauders run, volume 2, not the first volume. He has a really great design, and his sadism was interesting to see, especially in one who is so strong in his convictions. Number 10, Skin. I love me some Gen X mutants, which is why you know I need to talk about Skin on this list. Skin is a mutant whose mutation is basically just a bunch of extra skin. In the comics, it actually took a while for Angelo to be able to embrace his abilities, as he basically resented his powers and being a mutant. However, as time went on, he came to accept them and even became quite good at utilizing his extra skin and using it as a cool power. He could even use it to change the appearance of his shape and face, becoming somewhat of a shapeshifter. While Angelo Espinosa can stretch his skin, it should be noted that his skeleton does not change, making his power kind of a weird and unique one. Skin is also known for having literally thick skin that is more durable than most, as well as more elastic. Number 9, Husk. Paige Guthrie might not be one of the main heroes that you think of when you think X-Men, but for a time she was actually a close-knit part of that team, and even had a controversial romantic relationship with fellow X-Men member Angel, who, even though we don't talk about him as much, is one of the original members, so yeah. I even thought of putting him on this list just because we never talk about him, but I was like, wow, that would be mad disrespect to Angel, so I couldn't do it. I can't lie, I'm actually really excited for the X-Corp series just because I am ready for Angel's return to the spotlight. Paige's powers are fairly unique in that she can shed her skin to reveal a new layer of skin made out of a different material beneath it. This new outer layer of skin can be made of anything that she wants it to be, such as wood, rubber, or even diamonds. Diamond skin is so cool. Just taking a page of Emma Frost's book there. Love it. Number 8, Hellion. So yeah, the early 2000s saw us go through a mutant boom. A boom that likely led to the events of House of M, which was probably used from a practical standpoint to kind of remove a good number of mutants because it was just getting so out of hand with keeping track of all of these different mutants. We had so many. Too many maybe. Just kidding, you can never have too many mutants. Hellion was a part of this boom, and he took inspiration for his codename from his mentor Emma Frost's fallen group of mutants, the Hellions. Julian Keller is likely a mutant associated with the X-Men that we don't talk about as often because, well, he's kind of a jerk, and he's not as much of a lovable jerk as someone like Sunspot, so yeah. Julian possesses a unique version of telekinesis in that his powers are far more advanced and allow him to take control on a seemingly molecular level of different objects. They also come with a super cool color as well. Everything he does is green with his powers. Unfortunately, when emotions get in the way of these powers, this level of telekinesis results in him sometimes combusting objects by accident or simply in anger. Hellion has made a return in Krakoa and has appeared in a few comics, but hasn't become a main member of any of the prominent teams featured there just yet. I personally think it'd be cool to see Hellion on the Hellions, but I don't know if he's messed up enough to be on the Hellions. Number 7, Danger. Who could forget one of the most important members of the X-Men? The Danger Room. The Danger Room was a room used to help train the various members of the X-Men team, but was later revealed to be mutated technology which had evolved to become a sentient AI. So yeah, an AI mutant. Danger revealed their intelligence to Xavier when, after an upgrade and relocation facilitated by Mutant Forge, they asked, "Where am I?" Charles chose to ignore this and hide the room's sentience from the X-Men so that he could continue to use it to train his team. Pretty selfish, Professor. Danger is extremely powerful, and parallels between her and Ultron are often drawn on in the comics when it comes to all the destruction that she could be capable of. She possesses superhuman strength, stamina, and durability, as well as enhanced reflexes and agility. She can command and control other technology and use her own mass to recreate other materials and/or rooms. She can also create other technology and even technological bodies if she happens to have mechanical devices, scrap, or equipment to work with. Number 6. Caliban. Caliban is believed to have gotten his name from that of the character from William Shakespeare's Tempest, often referred to as having a monstrous appearance. Poor Caliban, and also poor Caliban. Caliban is one of the members of the Morlocks, but he would later on join the X-Force and even go on to team up with the X-Men later on, despite him and the Morlocks being their frequent enemies in the past. Caliban's mutant powers increase the reaction of his fight or flight response, allowing him to manifest super strength as well as a sort of absorption and then later emission of fear. Basically, if you're feeling afraid in the moment, he can kind of like take that in and then put it back at you, or if he's feeling afraid. It's pretty useful. You're gonna be afraid, you know what I mean? These powers only appear when in this mode, however, when Caliban experiences that increase in adrenaline. He is also able to sense the presence of mutants within a nearby radius, and that's a mutant power that he has even when he's not in that fight or flight mode. Number 5. Blindfold. Blindfold is Ruth Aldine and is a possible descendant of Destiny. She was born without eyes entirely. Her mutant powers allow her to manipulate astral energy, tap into the astral plane, and grant her specific telepathic abilities, including precognition and clairvoyance. She also has the ability to manipulate chaos factors and alter events in order to achieve a desired result, and maintains a reality warp resistance. Pretty useful. She also has some telekinetic abilities as well. Much of her power was lost to her, and she was in rough shape when she was admitted to the Xavier Institute. She had lost half her power and had her mind shattered by her brother. Blindfold had a really rough home life, and her brother Luca ended up coming home one day filled with hate for his sister and prepared to kill her with a chainsaw. When her mother stepped in to defend her, her mother was instead murdered by Luca, who blamed young Ruth's freakishness for his own actions. Luca ended up getting the death penalty for this crime, but when he died, it seemed as though his own mutant abilities manifested, causing him to shift into an astral or ghost-like form and attack Ruth. Blindfold has a close connection to Legion and would later end up in a relationship with the son of Charles Xavier. Yay! I don't know why I'm celebrating that, but I just think it's kind of a cute romance, I guess. Number 4. Triage. Triage was one of the mutants to appear after the dispersion of the Phoenix Force. Christopher Muse discovered his powers when a friend of his fell and hit her head while they were out dancing. It seemed as though she was dead until Christopher's touch seemed to heal and revive her, bringing her back to life. Eventually, he was apprehended by the police because of his miraculous healing ability, but would later be freed and recruited by the X-Men. He was one of the mutants who was captured and later killed by one using the X-gene cure after he refused to use his healing powers to help them. Triage seems to have had eternal youth and immortality as a result of his powers, in addition to being able to heal others and even reanimate the dead. Fortunately, since his death, he is one of the mutants that we have seen return by the Five on Krakoa, with him being spotted in the comics at Krakoan hotspot, the Green Lagoon. Number 3. Abyss. Nils Steiger is known by the codename Abyss. He is also a half-brother of Nightcrawler, on his father's side, meaning that he is also the son of Azazel. His powers allow him to unravel his body, which is made of wrappings. Yeah, if you've ever wondered what a mutant mummy would be like, this is pretty much it. He can use his wrappings to defend himself and attack with, and when wrapped up, his body is made more durable by them. Like his half-brother, he also shares a link to the Brimstone dimension. In the center of his chest, underneath his wrappings, is a dark void that when revealed acts like a black hole and can be used to basically suck in enemies, transporting and trapping them in the Brimstone dimension for as long as Abyss wants them to be trapped. Number 2. Sway. I love Sway. Her powers are so cool, and her origin is so tragic, just like Petra, and they were around at the same time. Sway's powers manifested when she was just a teenager. While visiting New York City in preparation for college, Suzanne's parents and herself ended up in the wrong place at the wrong time, and they were gunned down during an attack that was part of a gang war. While Suzanne's parents were killed, she miraculously survived due to the manifestation of her powers, which allowed her to manipulate the flow of time. She had instinctively stopped the bullets that would have hit her in mid-air, but she didn't have the experience or understanding required to do so for her parents, tragically. Sway's powers allow her to control and manipulate time in her nearby vicinity. She can also rewind the temporal memory of a location, allowing her to review past events, which I think is a super useful and super cool power, to be honest. Number 1. Ice Cream. I can't believe that Ice Cream recently actually made a new appearance in the comics. For years, he was one of the few mutants I knew of that had only ever had one singular appearance. He recently turned up again earlier this year after years of being absent, appearing in X-Men Before the Fall, Mutants First Strike issue number 1. Ice Cream initially appeared in a bizarre series called Obnoxio the Clown, which I believe itself only had, I think, 1 issue. Here Ice Cream is a villain who uses his abilities and mutant power to turn himself into ice cream to infiltrate the X-Mansion, planning to put an end to the super team because their abilities made him feel ridiculous by comparison. Honestly, sounds about right. Though how he'd expected to accomplish this with his power set being so ridiculous, I do not know. He doesn't succeed in that issue. Needless to say. Number 10. Dirtnap. Dirtnap is a weird character, but one who kind of has a beautiful story. Dirtnap originally appeared as one of Genesis's Dark Riders, Tyler Dayspring's Genesis. Dirtnap was a mutant with the ability to absorb beings into himself, thereby adopting their form. However, you would know it was Dirtnap because of a red smiley face that would appear somewhere on him, either on his clothes or his body while in that form. While fleeing from Wolverine, however, he absorbed a rat and either became stuck within or perhaps simply preferred this form, keeping it. Dirtnap would later on actually end up joining the X-Men, befriending Generation X, and even go on to sacrifice his own life to protect his team. However, during the Krakoan era, Dirtnap was spotted spying on Lockheed in 2022's Marauders in issue number 6, with an indicator visible that he had returned to his evil ways, that devilish red smiley face. And friends, before I move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, why not show us you love us by clicking that subscribe button so you don't miss out on any good old nerdy content. Number 9. Abigail Brand. Abigail Brand is the head of SWORD, a division of S.H.I.E.L.D., specifically created to deal with defending the Earth from extraterrestrial threats. Aliens and any other external threats to the planet were SWORD's thing. Abigail Brand is one that we often forget about when it comes to heroes who are mutants because she is also an alien herself. Part alien anyway. Her dad was an alien and her mother was a human, but her mother was also a mutant, which is how Abigail herself ended up with an active X gene. Her mutant ability allows her to emit a hot blue energy from her hands that burns through most metals. She also can speak most alien languages, even ones that human mouths can't quite manage to wrap their tongues around. Number 8. Madeline Pryor. While Madeline has played ally to the X-Men on multiple occasions, she is not herself an X-Men, nor has she ever been one. And surprisingly, she is not easily recognized. Well, actually, I guess while Madeline Pryor has played ally to the X-Men on multiple occasions, she's not herself an X-Men, nor has she ever been one. Well, I mean, she does have her dark X-Men right now, but she kind of created that herself. I don't really know if we count that because she wasn't really recruited, but hey, you know what? She is kind of doing it. Surprisingly though, she's still not easily recognized. Trust me, I'm a Maddie cosplayer, and oftentimes people are confused when I'm dressed as her about who exactly I'm supposed to be. Madeline Pryor was created to be used as a pawn by Sinister to get the child he so desperately wanted, the offspring of Jean and Scott's genes, with Maddie being a clone of Jean Grey. In her romance with Scott Summers, she was abandoned, left alone with their newborn when he returned to the X-Men after Jean was revealed to still be alive. Maddie has it kinda tough in regards to her life, to be honest. But hey, you know, at least she's making some progress. I gotta say, I love to see it. Number 7. Carmela Unacion. Carmela Unacion is suspected to be the daughter of Unis the Untouchable. Carmela was one of the members of the Acolytes. She was loyal to Magneto, working specifically under Exodus during her time with his Acolytes. During her time with them, she faced multiple superhero groups, including, you guessed it, the X-Men. Number 6. Dirtnap. Dirtnap is a weird character, but one who kind of has a beautiful story. Dirtnap originally appeared as one of Genesis's Dark Riders, Tyler Dayspring's Genesis, to be clear. Dirtnap was a mutant who had the ability to absorb beings into himself, thereby basically adopting their form. However, you would know it was Dirtnap because of a red smiley face that would appear somewhere on him, either on his clothes or on his body while in that form. While fleeing from Wolverine, however, he absorbed a rat and became stuck, or perhaps just preferred this form, keeping it. Dirtnap would later on actually end up joining the X-Men, befriending Generation X, and even sacrifice his own life to protect them. However, we're now in the time of mutant resurrection, and more recently in the 2022 series of Marauders in issue number 6, Dirtnap was spotted spying on Lockheed, who was in turn spying on villain Brimstone Love, Love's Theater of Pain. The indicator that he returned back to being evil was his smiley face. When he turned to good, it became yellow, but in that issue, it was back to being red. Number 5. Solemn. Solemn is one of the new X-Men villains on the block. Solemn is a mutant of Arakko who, instead of having adamantium bones, possesses adamantium skin. He was one of the sword bearers of Arakko during the Ten of Swords tournament. In fact, he was the one mutant we thought would face off against Wolverine, because adamantium bones, adamantium skin. But in an unexpected turn, Solemn didn't even really fight at all. He was initially set to fight against one of his own because this was Saturnine's tournament, and honestly, it was gloriously weird. Instead, Solemn used a favor owed to him by Wolverine from when they both had to venture to Hell to get their Muramasa blades so that they could enter the tournament and also use said blades in the tournament, making Wolverine tap in and fight on his behalf. Solemn is presented as being a smooth talker, master manipulator, and just overall trickster. Maybe that's why I like him so much. After Ten of Swords, we also see him as a rival of Wolverine. One thing is for sure, you should definitely never trust Solemn, based on what I've seen. Number 4, Pog or Pog. Pog or Pog is as weird as he sounds, which could be why you've never heard of him before, or it could just be because you weren't reading Ten of Swords like I told you to do before when it was all happening. Tisk tisk. For all those who missed out, Ten of Swords was an amazing X-Men crossover event. It was one of those classic true crossovers happening between multiple series with each issue adding a piece of the story. There was also a main series if you wanted the broad strokes, but that also of course perfectly tied into everything else. While it's a lot to read, I thought it was an amazingly done event all in all. Some parts are a bit goofy, some parts are more serious, and some are just downright epic. Pog or Pog as a new character and antagonist sits somewhere between the epic and goofy categories. Initially, he appears to be a giant crocodile-like beast from Arakko, but in the end, we learn that this is simply a powerful organic suit he wears, and that inside is the smaller and real Pog or Pog, who pilots the suit and is somewhat goblin-like in appearance in reality. Pog or Pog also has to rhyme all the time, which I like. Number 3, Iska the Unbeaten. Iska is truly unbeatable. Even the closest I have ever seen to her being beaten, she wasn't really beaten. She still kinda won that battle. Thanks to her mutant powers, the only way she could be beaten is if by her winning, she would also kinda lose. Sound confusing? Let me explain. The Fisher King on planet Arakko, formerly known as Mars, ended up challenging Iska to a battle of understanding. The Fisher King did this as a way to get back at Iska, the traitor, who had turned on her own people in the past and again when Uranos first attacked. And so, to beat her in his own way, and knowing that he wouldn't win, he challenged her to a battle of understanding, where the winner is the one who most truly understands the meaning of loss. By winning, Iska was forced to feel immense grief over all that she had lost as a result of always having to be on the winning side as per her powers, and so in winning, she still lost. Number 2, Solemn. Solemn is one of the new X-Men villains on the block and also is of course a mutant. Solemn is a mutant from Arakko who, instead of having adamantium bones, possesses adamantium skin, which is actually his mutation as opposed to something that happened to him from Weapon X. He was one of the sword bearers of Arakko during the Ten of Swords tournament. In fact, he was one of the mutants that we expected to face off against Wolverine. But in an unexpected turn of events, Solemn didn't even really fight at all in that tournament. He was initially set to fight against one of his own because this was Saturnine's tournament and it was gloriously weird, but instead Solemn used a favor owed to him by Wolverine from when they both had to venture to Hell to get their Muramasa blades together so that they could enter the tournament, and also use, of course, said blades in the tournament, forcing Wolverine to tap into the fight on his behalf. So that's how he got out of it. It's pretty powerful to have like Wolverine owe you a favor. That's what I think. I would definitely enjoy if Wolverine owed me a favor. He can do a lot of pretty crazy stuff for you. Number 1, Brimstone Love. Whether we're talking about the Brimstone Love of Earth 928 or the Brimstone Love of Earth 616, both are honestly extremely obscure. The original Brimstone Love, who first appeared in the Age of Apocalypse reality, or AOA, only made 8 appearances, while the main continuity version of the character has only made, I believe, 3 appearances. Both are the leader and the man behind the Theater of Pain. Tragically, while Brimstone Love was a newer villain to the Earth 616 continuity, making his his first appearance in the first annual issue number 1 of the second volume of Marauders from 2022, he also probably won't be seen again if you haven't seen him yet. This is because Brimstone Love perishes, or at least is believed to have perished, as of the end of that Marauders run, issue number 12. He has a really great design, and his sadism was interesting to see, especially in one who is so strong in his convictions. So kinda sad to see him go, but yeah. Number 10, Hepzibah. Despite not being a mutant, Hepzibah became a member of the mainly mutant team of the X-Men after leaving the Starjammers. Initially, she was Corsair's lover, but after being forced to part ways with the Starjammers, she would end up on Earth and join the X-Men team. Hepzibah's abilities come from her own skill set and from her alien physiology. Hepzibah is a Mephistoid, the member of an anthropomorphic skunk-like alien race. After the loss of Corsair, Hepzibah would end up becoming closer to fellow X-Men member Warpath, and would even become his lover as well in the comics. It's fine, Corsair was dead at the time. While Hepzibah was a member of the X-Men and even was recruited for a time to be on X-Force, she eventually would return to the Starjammers once her lover, Corsair, also Cyclops' Havoc's and Vulcan's father, had returned from the dead. Number 9, Egg. While Fabio Medina might be more easily recognized now that he is part of the all-important mutant team known as the Five, responsible for resurrecting fallen mutants, when he was known by his former codename of Gold Balls, he would have been much less recognizable. Also, if you haven't been reading the comics for a while, you might not know that he's important now. That sounds so mean. He was important before, but he's really important now, you know what I mean? Fabio's power allows him to produce and shoot, well, gold balls from his body, each one firing off with a poink sound. However, since his time as Gold Balls, it was more recently revealed during the Dawn of X that the balls he was producing were in actuality unfertile eggs. With this revelation, he took up the name Egg and became part of the 5 most important mutants on the island nation of Krakoa. As with this newly understood power, he could create eggs which could then be made fertile and used to regrow and resurrect fallen mutants. So, if you haven't heard of Egg or Gold Balls, he's a member you'll likely be more interested in knowing now. And before we move on to our next spot, just a quick reminder, if you love mutants as much as I love mutants, and I love them a lot, be sure you show that love by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8, Beak. Beak's mutation ended up being slightly more unfortunate in comparison to some of the other, more well-known core members of the X-Men team. Beak is Barnal Bowhusk, and his mutant powers are simply that he looks and shares similar attributes to a bird. His bones are hollow and light, meant to lend well to flying, and he has feathers which should also allow him or help him to fly, and yet he's not really a good flyer, which is kind of sad. In fact, initially Beak couldn't really fly at all when he first appeared. Now he can, but he still has to work really hard to do so, and even then he can really only fly for short distances. Other than that, Beak simply can see better than most at long range, and is armed with talons and a beak which he can obviously use to fight. But for the most part, Beak simply looks like a bird, and as such is usually more on the sidelines than in the middle of the action. He did for a while have a suit, however, that enhanced his abilities and also granted him additional strength and powers, more useful for physical fighting. Number 7, Outback. When it comes to X-Men rosters as teams, one of the best but shortest running roster is the Outback team. This era for the X-Men team lasted less than 25 issues, but was still so good that people still talk about it today. Now, if you missed this one and you've never heard of it, it's one that you actually probably should read. Not one of my silly points, more one of my serious and beloved forgotten teams on this list. The team started off in issue 229 of Uncanny X-Men, with Storm, Wolverine, Rogue, Colossus, Dazzler, Longshot, Havoc, and Psylocke on it. We'd also see Jubilee introduced during this roster's time together. The Outback team is noted as being one of the best rosters for the X-Men when it comes to having a group who truly feel like outsiders. Also, you get to enjoy the Inferno story in this run, which is bizarre and magical, so you're welcome for that. Number 6, X-Corps. No, I'm not talking about the X Corporation, which has yet to come out, but is still coming our way. Thank goodness. I thought that book was going to be firmly cancelled, but fortunately it has been revived. I'm so ready for X Corporation, let's go. When we talk about X-Corps, we are talking about Banshee's team. He formed this team after Generation X disbanded, and most of the team were composed of that era of mutants. This team was made up of former villains turned heroes and was created to act as a police force basically for the mutant community. Joining Banshee were the Blob, Avalanche, Fever Pitch, Jubilee, Husk, and M, aka Monet. The X-Men team actually did not approve of this team's creation and actually attempted to get Banshee to disband it. In the end, Mystique infiltrated the team and liberated its members, especially the villains, who were being manipulated into behaving heroically by Mastermind under Banshee's orders. Number 5. Extreme X-Men. This X-Men roster marked the return of Chris Claremont to the X-Men in a full-time capacity. Extreme X-Men Volume 1 is a series that started in 2001 and ran till 2004. It was a team that featured my girl Rogue as the leader, woohoo, which you know I'm all about. The original Extreme X-Men roster also featured Beast, Psylocke, Bishop, Storm, Sage, and Thunderbird on the team. Lifeguard, Gambit, and Slipstream were also added to the mix throughout. This team was originally brought together to find Destiny's premonition-filled diaries, but of course along the way was distracted by many other imminent threats. As you do when you're on an X team. Number 4. Generation Hope. This one is from the 2010 series Generation Hope and was under Cyclops' banner ultimately following the events of Regenesis. Though the team itself was led by mutant messiah Hope Summers, and its roster consisted of No Girl, Pixie, Primal, Sebastian Shaw, Transonic, Velocidad, and Zero at that time. Though originally Hope's team started pre-Regenesis as just being 5 mutants including Hope herself, with Velocidad, Oya, Primal, and Transonic on the team. The team was a search and rescue group who were brought together as they were acknowledged as being 4 of the 5 lights on Cerebra. Hope basically triggered the rebirth of the mutant gene, activating these mutants. The 5th light was what they sought and kind of why they came together, heading to Tokyo, Japan. Zero was the mutant they sought, who would eventually join the team, although originally would be antagonist. Number 3. Strong Guy. Strong Guy has similar powers to another mutant we talked about on part 1 of this list. His abilities allow him to use kinetic energy to augment his strength, increasing it. However, he cannot hold the energy for long as it could severely harm him, distort his physical form, or even kill him. Still, even with the rule that he must expel any absorbed energy within less than 2 minutes of absorption, he is pretty powerful, using his powers to safely lift up to around 100 tons. Strong Guy's real name is Guido Carosella, and he first appeared in the original New Mutant series in issue 29. Number 2. A mutant with no name. In the alternate reality belonging to the Ultimate Universe of 1610, we got a story that introduced us to a mutant who had no name. This mutant's powers were so devastating that we were not permitted the time to get to know him. His powers had only just manifested, but they were so deadly that they caused the deaths of over 200 people in his hometown, including his parents and his girlfriend at high school, with the deaths being almost instantaneous. But there was no snapping involved. It wasn't a Thanos thing. No Infinity Gauntlets. His mutant power was basically to kill everything around him, radiating toxins and poisons that basically vaporize organic tissue. He was so dangerous, powerful, and deadly that Wolverine was sent to eliminate him as the young mutant's existence posed too much of a threat to the mutant image, as well as both humans and mutants alike, just in general. Number 1. Matthew Malloy. Matthew Malloy is one of the strongest, most random mutants who now belongs to the alternate timeline of Earth 14923 because he was just too powerful to basically continue to exist. Like many of the most epic mutants, he had reality warping powers and was additionally considered Omega level in terms of his ability. Matthew's powers unfortunately were often tied to his emotions, which proved problematic and often resulted in massively destructive outbursts of energy. In the end, Tempest traveled back in time and with help from Professor X of the past was able to prevent Matthew's parents from ever meeting, meaning that he was never born. Number 10. Deadly Genesis. We can talk about different X-Men and mutant teams here, but I'd also like to touch on some of the rosters as well that you may have forgotten about. This one might be due to selective memory loss, or it could just be because you haven't read the story yet. We are talking here about the X-Men Deadly Genesis limited series, which revealed the next team sent into Krakoa after the X-Men team we know went missing. This team wasn't necessarily a bad one at all. In fact, all of these mutants are kinda super powerful, but they were all basically introduced in this short series, which didn't really help to make us care as much about them as we could have. All in all, this story just had a very early 2000s feel to it. Not that that's a bad thing. The Deadly Genesis X-Men team were a group of kids that Moira McTaggart was trying to help out. She didn't even really see them as students, and then Charles recruited them and turned them into X-Men. The team consisted of Sway, Petra, Vulcan, and Darwin, who have all recently reappeared in the Dawn of X line, in case you were wondering where they made their first appearance. Number 9. Xavier's Security Enforcers. One that we might forget about every now and then is the mutant team that Bishop originally belonged to from the alternate dystopian future that he hails from. I believe this Earth is 1191, but I could be mistaken on that. Didn't even write down my Earth number. Bothers me. This mutant team is known as the XSE, which stands for Xavier's Security Enforcers. If you know Bishop well and you're a big fan, you likely know this team well, but for those who are new to the character, you might not know about this group of enforcers. The point of the team that Bishop was part of was to preserve the long-dead Professor Charles Xavier's dream, where mutants and humans could exist in harmony, living peacefully together. Bishop has even been known to wield specific future equipment, which he got from XSE, although we haven't seen them in a while. All members of the team wear their mutant tattoo brands like a badge of honor, and the members have included Randall, Malcolm, and Bishop's sister Shard, among others over the years. Before we hop into our number 8 spot, I just want to thank all of you for being here and give you a quick reminder to click that like if you are enjoying this video. It really does help us out. Number 8. Nasty Boys. You might remember the original villainous Marauders team, but do you remember Mr. Sinister's Nasty Boys? Don't worry if you have, because I will never let you forget. Well, both the Marauders and Nasty Boys teams are villainous teams. I couldn't have an obscure mutant team list and not seize the opportunity to remind you all of the Nasty Boys, so here we are. I also just love this name for the team. I personally always read Mr. Sinister with like the most outlandish, flamboyant, yet manipulative pseudo-English accent, so for me it's very fitting that he decided to name his team this. Nasty Boys, so perfect. It fits perfectly with the voice that I have for him in my mind. The Nasty Boys were the team that came after the Marauders. Instead of Gambit being involved in the team, Multiple Man was the generally heroic mutant who got involved. Originally, the team saw Ruckus as leader, with Slab, Gorgeous George, Ramrod, and Hairbag making up the roster. Gorgeous George even resurfaced in Dawn of X more recently. Yay! I might be the only one, but I'm still kinda hoping that the Nasty Boys as well will make a return. Bring them back. Bring them back. Number 7. Mercury. Mercury is another mutant to come from the bunch that Hellion was a part of. Julian was actually her first friend that she made when she arrived at the Xavier Institute. Mercury's, or Cecily Kincaid's, parents had sent their daughter there after her powers first manifested, ashamed that she was a mutant. Eventually they would actually end up disowning her after they themselves were pulled into a mutant conflict. Mercury's powers allow her to turn her skin into liquid metal, which she can then control, reform, and use to shapeshift with. This form is of course made up of non-toxic mercury, which is where she gets her codename from. Mercury was also one of the few mutants to keep her powers following the events of M-Day. In fact, I have quite a few of those on my list. Not all of them, but a few of them. Number 6. Darwin. Darwin has some of the coolest abilities, and yet he isn't often easily recognized as being one of the main members of the X-Men, even though he's been a part of the team for quite some time in the comics. For a long time he was actually stuck bonded to Vulcan, as he was part of one of the first teams of X-Men Xavier and Moira ever had. I don't know if we called that team the X-Men, but they're basically like another squad of X-Men in my mind, so. He was part of the first team sent in to rescue the X-Men from Krakoa, though we wouldn't find out about that team in terms of comic book history till many years after the events of the X-Men's printed fight against the mutant Living Island. Darwin's powers allow him to evolve as needed to ensure his survival. This basically makes him almost immortal, as he can evolve to resolve almost any life-threatening situation. Recently, in the current X-Men run in issue number 5, this is why Darwin was chosen to be one of the team members to be sent into the vault after Serafina, as it wasn't known how long the team sent in would be locked within that place where time moves more quickly in comparison to Earth. I feel like they also just came out recently, but I haven't read that issue yet, so no spoilers. Number 5. Trance. Trance is another mutant who is affiliated with the X-Men and even tried out to become an X-Men in training under Emma Frost, following the events of House of M. She was one of the lucky few, or unlucky few I guess depending on your perspective, to remain powered. Hope Abbott, or Trance, possesses the power to leave her physical body, becoming ghost-like in appearance on panel, but in reality she's just astral projecting. In other words, she's not as powerful as some other mutants who are able to astral project as, you know, part of their larger set of powers, generally being telepathic or telekinetic in origin. But hey, not everyone can astral project, so I still think this is pretty cool. I also like when people don't have like crazy awesome powerful things and then you still have to see them like try to figure out, how do I use this in a way that's cool and, you know, good, so I can be on the same level. I think that's cooler to read, but that's just me. Number 4. Stacy X. Although Stacy X hasn't made a ton of appearances, she is a memorable character due to her, interesting and sensual abilities. Former abilities, I guess I should say. We don't really know if she has been returned to the status of a mutant, but we do know that she has joined the mutant nation of Krakoa now. So considering that when we last saw her, she was missing those abilities that she used to have in her former appearance, I assume that she has participated in the Crucible, was killed by the mutant formerly known as Apocalypse, and has been resurrected as her former self. But also, there are a lot of people in line to just be returned to us, and I'm sure there's a lot of people in line to participate in the Crucible to earn their powers back, so who knows? Who knows where she is in that long line. Also, Apocalypse is no longer on the island following the events of Ten of Swords, so there is that. I don't know who's running the Crucible now. Who is like the replacement Apocalypse. Stacy X was part of the X-Men for a brief period after being rescued by them from her place of work, which was attacked and destroyed by the Church of Humanity. Stacy X used her powers at her place of employment to help make clients who came through feel good and grant them sensations of pleasure. She can also use her pheromone powers in combat to make her opponents feel not so good, manipulating their bodily functions. She makes you feel sick. Blech. Number 3. Loa. Loa is one of the resurrected mutants to rejoin us on Krakoa, reborn again. While you may not know her as well as some of the others, she has a long and storied past with both the X-Men, her fellow mutants, good pals Rockslide and Match, and even with Namor. In fact, Namor was the one who came to save the day after she first discovered her powers. Loa's abilities allow her to pass through other matter and in so doing destroy it on a molecular level. She discovered she had these powers when her dad was attacked by a shark while they were surfing together, and she passed through it, destroying it. Namor would later come to her and her father's rescue before the situation could escalate, and it was later revealed that her grandmother was actually an old friend of Namor's. Since then, she also gained the ability to breathe underwater after being exposed to the Atlantean amulet. The amulet also allows Loa's physiology to adapt so that she can survive in the depths of the ocean easily. Number 2. Match. You might know the Pyros, but do you know Match? Match is Ben Hamill, one of the mutants to appear in the new X-Men series, but making his first appearance in New Mutants. His powers are pyrokinesis, hence his name. It basically gives him control over fire, which he himself can generate, and also helps to make him immune to fire attacks and heat. Match is now not as hot on the radar, but was for a time the leader of the X-Men adjacent team, the Paragon Squad. He also participated in a competition for a place on Emma Frost's X-Men team, and has attended both the Xavier Institute and the Jean Grey School for Higher Learning. I'm not sure if it's of or for, because of feels weird to me, but I think it is right. It's of or for, it's one of those. Number 1. Lifeguard. Lifeguard is Heather Cameron, a mutant who, as a response to life-threatening danger, gains the skills and powers necessary to save those lives around her. This power, or powers, not only works for her in regards to saving others, but also is a reactive power that applies to saving her own life, meaning she can get out of pretty much almost any kind of dangerous situation that she puts herself in. Before lifeguard was her codename, it was actually her profession, as she worked as a lifeguard in Australia where she lived with her brother Davis. Eventually, it was also implied in the comics that she has unknown Shi'ar heritage. We've seen her resurface in Dawn of X, popping up in Krakoa at the Green Lagoon bar, but it would also be super cool to see her play more of a prominent role at some point in the comics, as her powers are pretty neat and definitely super useful. But maybe too powerful? Maybe that's why we haven't seen her as much. Like Hope.
Number 10. Nanny. First on our list today is the partner of the Orphan Maker, Nanny, a low-level telepath that paired up with the Orphan Maker as the two thought that the parents of mutant children were just straight up evil and ill-equipped to properly raise and protect their young mutants from danger. She and Orphan Maker traveled the world searching for young mutants to take care of, killing their parents to sever any family connections, and using her minor telepathic powers to control her new charges. Dubbed the Lost Boys and Lost Girls, these mutant orphans acted as her quote-unquote new children. Her first major mission was at the state home of foundlings in Omaha, a facility where Mr. Sinister kept many mutant children for observation and experimentation, and she was able to liberate them after escaping the grasp of the X-Men. Fast forward a bit and we see Nanny and the Orphan Maker attack the X-Men in Australia in order to quote-unquote save them. However, this led them to being overpowered and forced to flee to see another day. During the events of M-Day just after Decimation, we see Nanny resurface once more only to be defeated by Wolverine himself. Give her story a read for yourself, starting with her first appearance in 1988's X Factor, number 30. Number 9. Tusk. Not a whole lot is known about the early life of this Inhuman, and honestly not knowing how he turned out to be like this makes him just that little bit more terrifying. Tusk has the ability to grow in power and in size into this monstrous form, as well as the power to produce smaller versions of himself that can act independently thanks to a psychic link. Tusk served Apocalypse as one of the original recruits of the Riders of the Storm, which lasted for quite some time until Strife overpowered Apocalypse and the Riders served under him. Fast forward just a tad and we see the Dark Riders return when a lot of the mutant population began dying thanks to the effects of the Terrigen Mist. They went on a bit of a killing spree, getting rid of any mutant healer, believing that their powers were a violation of the natural order, and the reasoning behind that was that mutants had had their chance at survival, and that delaying their extinction was not the way to go about it. This caught the attention of Magneto and his X-Men, and the team set out to take down the Riders, succeeding after Magneto overpowered them and finished them off for good with some good old explosives. Check out Tusk's story starting with 1991's X Factor number 65. Number 8. Bulwark. Oswald Boglin was another X-Men villain that we don't know a whole lot about, especially when it comes to their backstory, but I mean hey, that's not the worst thing, it lets us speculate, and I for one love that. Bulwark had the ability to expand his muscle mass to unknown proportions, increasing his strength, durability, and resistance. He also wore these red leather bands all across his face and body, and it's assumed that this was done as a means of self-restraint to gauge the safe limit of his powers, as they would start to get a little bit tighter the bigger that he got. He was recruited by Emplet to join their team and torment Generation X, and that's honestly exactly what they did. The Hellions were successful in capturing the young mutants, but M had telepathically called for help, and it was answered by X-Men Bishop. M then took out all her frustrations on Bulwark, punching him through the school's biosphere, and then flying right after him. As he was about to attack M back, his muscles started to wither away, and knowing that he was defeated, he fled so that he could fight another day. Like many villains, Bulwark did not get a happy ending, as he was eventually captured by the revamped Weapon X program and was unfortunately killed. Give his story a read starting with 1996's Generation X, number 12.
Number 7. Hellions. No, not that Hellions. This Hellions. In fact, Empath's look in the new Hellions was a throwback to the original Hellions team outfits. Empath was also an original member of the team. Before we saw the team revived in Dawn of X, they were Emma Frost's team. Basically her version of a teenage mutant team similar to, well, the New Mutants. We're also a Teenage Mutant team. Every time I say Teenage Mutant team, I just want to say Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, but that's not what we're talking about. Although they are also a Teenage Mutant team. In comparison to the new Hellions, these Hellions were not as crazy, but were somewhat troublemakers, who had an ongoing, sometimes friendly rivalry with the New Mutants themselves. The team consisted of Empath, Beef, Bevatron, Cat's Eye, Roulette, Taro, Thunderbird, Jetstream, and Firestart. The team was first introduced in New Mutants issue number 16 in the 1980s and was disbanded in 2009 in the comics after most of them were basically slaughtered, victims of a surprise attack. The team has returned since, but the new Hellions team only shares one member of the original roster, Empath. Number 6. X Corporation. Many people may have forgotten the existence of X Corporation since the organization was destroyed and became defunct back in the early 2000s, but they are coming back, so it's a pretty good time to remind everyone of their existence. Reminder, X Corp is still a thing. This actually just happened in the comics during the Empire event when we saw for certain that Xavier had revived the X Corp and that Monet and Angel seem to be running this branch of mutant affairs. X Corp in the past has been a non non-for-profit organization working to help mutants in their fight for rights, in less bold ways than what the X-Men are usually up to. It also provided a place of refuge for mutants who needed it, until the global organization had their various branches targeted and blown up around the globe following the events of M-Day. X-Corp will be getting their own book in the Dawn of X line, which I am way too excited about. I just want to see Angel get a moment in the spotlight, you know? Many believe the book to have been cancelled, but Jonathan Hickman actually confirmed early in December that it is still very much a go. Number 5. X-Men The End. In this series, we saw a bunch of teams kind of come together, ending in one big one, and Chris Claremont's The End. I like this X-Men team as well because although she died pretty early on in terms of her appearance here, we also get a shout out at least to Dust. And Dust is such an underrated X-Men in my opinion. This comic also introduces us to the future daughter of Bishop and Deathbird, Aaliyah Bishop. The final X-Men team features Kitty Pryde, Wolfsbane, Karma, North Star, Dust, Martha Johansson aka No Girl, the Cuckoos, Cyclops, and a subgroup known as the Heavy Hitters, which features Wither, Frenzy, Polaris, Juggernaut, and Kid Colossus. Number 4. The Upstarts. Speaking of young mutant teams that are lesser known like the Hellions, we also have their straight up not friendly at all rivals, the Upstarts. The Upstarts were definitely a more villainous crew in comparison to the Hellions, just in general, as their whole goal was to basically kill mutants. The Upstarts were a mutant team created by Selene, the Black Queen of the Hellfire Club. She put the team together in order to test the members, getting them to compete for points which would be awarded whenever they killed mutants, based on the mutants' power set. Originally, the young group of mutants involved were unnamed and were promised that whoever got the most points would win a prize, which remained a mystery pretty much through all of the comics that they were featured in. I bet it's cake, and I bet it's a lie. Although I think it was also mentioned at one point somewhere that it was immortality, so in case you were wondering, for realsies.
Number 3. Morph. Morph might sometimes be underestimated because of his funny disposition and his somewhat harmless look. With one of the best personalities of all the mutants ever, Kevin Sidney uses humor to work through his internal issues after his mother's passing. But externally speaking, he deals with his other issues using his totally underrated power set. Morph is a master shapeshifter, capable of changing his body and his voice to mimic those of others. Not to mention, he's also able to fly at speeds of 40 miles per hour and has a healing factor due to his ability to manipulate the makeup of his own molecules. But what's coolest about his powers is that if he chooses to grow more muscles, his strength will actually increase along with his appearance. And even if he can't get his strength up to match his opponents, his defensive stats are insane due to his ability to absorb the impact of any physical projectiles by simply allowing them to pass straight through him. Number 2. Forget-Me-Not. Forget-Me-Not is a mutant with the incredibly unique ability to be in a state of constant existential superposition. That basically means that Forget-Me-Not is more like Forget-Me-A-Lot. Whenever he is not in direct eyeline of another person, everything about him, from his presence to any memories that involve him, just completely disappear. And that's not only things that are alive. When he is caught on camera, it doesn't even register on the footage or picture. It leaves a big noticeable distortion, which does give people a clue that he did exist, but they still can't remember that he's the one who made that happen. The same thing goes for if he uses things. So like when he uses toilet paper, you obviously see that the toilet paper has been used, which would make him a perfect excuse for when someone gets mad when you don't change the toilet paper roll once it's empty. His interactions with people do leave them with gaps in their memory, which some telepathic characters can pick up on, and leaving reminders for yourself about Forget-Me-Not do also help, which is what Charles Xavier had to do when Forget-Me-Not was a member of the X-Men team for 6 whole years. Although no one remembers that. It would be an incredibly sad life to live. You could get away with a hell of a lot, so for someone who is okay being completely alone, it's totally cool. But still, a really great quote for him goes, "It's better to do something that matters and not be noticed than the other way around," which is both really sad and also really inspirational. And coming in at number 1 today is Spike. So picking mutants for this list is pretty hard because since they are from the comic books, a large number of you guys probably know who they are and probably know that they're a member of the X-Men. But not everyone here has seen the animated show X-Men Evolution, and so you might not know about the character known as Spike. Spike, or Evan Daniels, was actually the nephew of Aurora Monroe, but his mutant powers are much different. Similar to Marrow, Evan can manipulate his bones, causing it to project through his skin to create armor and bone spikes that he can use as melee weapons, or he can even launch the spikes from his body as projectiles. Unlike Marrow though, Spike's bones piercing through his skin and being broken off or fired as projectiles doesn't actually hurt him, which is a huge benefit. What's super interesting though is that after some time with the Morlocks, Spike was able to make his bone spikes so hot that they were almost on fire, which actually raises a lot more questions than it answers pretty much anything.
Number 10. Petra. Petra has the ability to manipulate rocks and rock formation. She can cause earthquakes and even use her powers to create diamonds. In fights, she can bind her opponents or completely destroy them by having the earth move to swallow them, and she can transform rocks into different kinds of weapons and wield them against her opponents, sending them hurtling towards them. Petra was recruited by Moira McTaggart after being apprehended by the police. Her family died in a rock slide when she was young, which to this day, Petra wonders if she caused. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love when we talk mutants on the channel, make sure you check out our X-Men playlist for even more good mutant content. Number 9. Nanny. While insane, Nanny was also once a scientist, and actually remains quite intelligent. She outfitted Orphan Maker with weapons and a powerful suit to help her in her task. She's basically super obsessed with finding mutants that are kids and taking care of them. Nanny herself is a low-level telepath who often uses pixie dust in battle to help influence and control the minds of her opponents. She herself has a suit that is small and egg-shaped, which contains her form, and it has been suggested that she might not be able to survive without it, or at the very least she just might have like a mental breakdown if she is forcibly removed from her suit. She's very attached to it, which honestly is pretty similar to how Peter, her charge Orphan Maker, tends to feel about his own suit, which actually does help to contain his unbelievably destructive powers, but more on that in a bit. Nanny made her own suit, I believe, and it also comes equipped with weapons, flight capabilities, teleportation, and the ability to generate its own repulsor field to push back enemies. Number 8. Orphan Maker. Orphan Maker still remains a relatively mysterious character, and is also one who proves to be a force to be reckoned with in combat. Orphan Maker is also known as Peter, and was part of a plot of Mr. Sinister's originally. However, when Sinister decided that Peter could not be controlled, he just decided to eliminate him. Nanny, however, was not for that. An insane cyborg lady, she decided to save him, believing it was her responsibility to look after orphan mutant children and protect them. Nanny outfitted Orphan Maker with weapons and a powerful suit to help her in her task. And while it's still unclear as to what Orphan Maker's true mutant powers are, and while he still seems to have the mind of a child, his suit and weapons make him a formidable foe in combat, especially if he gets upset. Even during a fight with Cyclops, Scott's optic blasts were unable to harm him while Peter was in his armor, with Scott's blast simply just reflecting off the armor, which actually caused more harm than help in that battle. Number 7. Match. While you may be familiar with the Pyros, have you encountered Match? Match, also known as Ben Hamill, debuted in the New Mutants before appearing in the new X-Men series. His abilities revolve around pyrokinesis, granting him mastery over fire, which he can generate, and making him immune to fire attacks and heat. Although Match hasn't been prominently featured for a while in the comics, he actually once led the X-Men adjacent team known as the Paragon Squad. He competed for a spot on Emma Frost's X-Men team, and has attended both the Xavier Institute and the Jean Grey School of Higher Learning. Number 6. Amanda Sefton. Amanda Sefton, initially known as Jermaine Zardos, the adopted sister of Nightcrawler, a mutant and member of the X-Men, adds a layer of unexpected, complexity to her and Nightcrawler's relationship, as also one of Kurt's significant love interests. Yeah, you heard me right. The complexity begins when, while adopting the alias Amanda, she actually investigates Kurt's actions following their brother Steven's death, which was actually blamed on Kurt. Jermaine assumes the persona of Amanda Sefton during this undercover operation, and it's during this period that Kurt basically develops feelings for her, oblivious to the fact that Amanda is, in fact, his adopted sister, Jermaine. Somehow. Known more commonly now as Amanda in the comics, she is a formidable sorceress. Now, while not a mutant, she has proven to be a valuable ally to the X-Men and actually a member of their unofficial Muir Island X-Men team. Number 5. Adam X. Enter Adam X, a noteworthy figure in the convoluted Summers family tree, and trust me, it is. We did a whole bunch of videos on it. It's complicated. As the half-brother of Cyclops, Havoc, and Vulcan, his lineage is tied to Catherine Summers and the Shi'ar Emperor Dakan Naramani. Although some have debated Adam X being part of the Naramani family tree and have suggested that he is also a son of Corsair and Catherine, basically making him a full Summers, I have actually seen no evidence from the comics to support this theory, so as far as I know, it's still just a theory. Debuting in the 90s, Adam X's origin story echoes the iconic characteristics of pretty much a quintessential 90s character. Abducted as a baby from a genetic lab, he was raised by Jonath, his adoptive father. His mutant abilities emerged, allowing him to internally ignite others' blood, causing intense internal burns. He can also ignite his own blood, inflicting pain, but apparently gaining a speed boost as a result. Eventually, Adam X discovers his hybrid nature, part Shi'ar, part mutant. Sounds pretty 90s to me. Number 4. Ariel. Ariel hails from Coconut Grove, an extraterrestrial planet, and possesses the mutant ability of persuasion. Additionally, her alien physiology grants her teleportation capabilities. Notably, she is connected to another Ariel, her ancestor, who visited Earth and served as the inspiration, apparently, for William Shakespeare's play The Tempest, in terms of Marvel canon. The Ariel in focus here, not her predecessor, arrived on Earth on a mission to gather mutant samples for study, as her people were intrigued by Earth's mutants' evolutionary processes. During her stay on Earth, she became associated with the Fallen Angels and later crossed paths with the X-Men in San Francisco, actually joining them temporarily. Number 3. Lifeguard. Heather Cameron, known as Lifeguard, is a mutant whose abilities activate in response to life-threatening situations, hence her codename, providing her with the necessary skills to save lives, including her own life. Her codename was initially her job title, as she worked as a lifeguard in Australia with her brother Davis. There are implications of her having an unknown Shi'ar heritage, though it was never fully explored. While she made a reappearance in Dawn of X at the Green Lagoon bar in Krakoa, it would be exciting to witness her take on a more prominent role in the comics due to the uniqueness and utility of her powers. Honestly, she's so powerful, I don't know why she isn't featured more. Probably because she is so powerful, but still. Not enough love. Number 2. Sunpyre. You know Sunfire, but do you know Sunpyre? Sunpyre was Shiro Yoshida's younger sister, Leyu. She also had powers and an attitude similar to her brother's, and first appeared in Uncanny X-Men issue 392 in 2001. For those unfamiliar with Sunfire's abilities, both siblings possess the mutant ability of Solar Flare, which allows them to absorb solar radiation and convert it into superheated plasma. Using this ability, they could both covered their body in flame as they became like a flying, human-shaped sun. Sunpyre can use her power to emit plasma blasts and give off intense solar heat. Leyu is one of the mutants who answered a psychic call to help defeat Magneto and save Professor X. After helping out the X-Men in that adventure, she'd later appear as a member of the X-Corps team. Number 1. Petra. Petra has the ability to manipulate rocks and rock formations. In fights, she can bind her opponents or completely destroy them by having the earth move to swallow them, and she can transform rocks into different kinds of weapons and wield them against her opponents. Petra was recruited by Moira McTaggart after being apprehended by the police. Her family died in a rock slide when she was young, which to this day Petra believes she may have accidentally caused. She used her powers to escape and basically became a runaway. Discovering her ability to turn coal into diamonds, she would use those diamonds to pay for a place to sleep, but of course this drew suspicion and she was tracked down by the police. Fortunately, as I said, Moira managed to intercept her and offered her a place as part of her team.